Number 10, 3D Man. Okay, we're gonna start this one out on a trippy note. Meet Charles Chandler. He entered Marvel Comics back in 1977 in Marvel Premiere issue 35. He's an American test pilot who got his powers from radiation after an explosion while escaping Skrulls. Now, Charlie was consumed by radiation and his brother Hal had to witness the entire thing. Super tragic. Now, the explosion imprinted an image of Charlie onto Hal's glasses. So now if Hal focuses hard enough, he can project Charlie back into existence as this man, this 3D man. Now, Hal would fall into a coma when this happens, and over time, the brothers would swap on who's actually controlling the 3D man. Mind you, the 3D man is 3 times stronger than the average human being, but he's also 3 times as confusing, because none of these powers should make sense in any way. And before we continue on with this trippy list, guys, if you can go ahead and give this video a thumbs up right at the bottom, that would be awesome. And if you haven't already subscribed, you're here, you're watching, click that while you're at it, and then we can be friends. You guys are the best. Now let's get right back into the video. Number 9, Stone Boy. Dag Wentham is not from Earth, first of all. He's actually from the planet Zwen as a member of the Legion of the Substitute Heroes. He made his DC Comics debut with Adventure Comics issue 306. He comes out of the gate hot. He comes out confident. He calls himself Stone Boy because he can turn himself into solid stone. But the Legionnaires said my power was too static and would accomplish nothing positive. Watch me change. I mean, we didn't need the last 80% of that, but they're also not wrong. Your powers are amazing, but you can't really do much. He just turns to stone. The team uses him by dropping him as a stone on the head of their enemies. That's like when you're playing Smash Bros and your friend picks Kirby and all they do is just float above and then smash down on you. You're like, really? We just fight? I'm that person, I'm that friend. So this ability came because his homeworld would rotate so slowly that the nights are a half of a year long. So they evolved super suspended animation. Hypnotic suggestion is the reason he can wake up, but how does any of this even happen? It's not even explained. Does it hurt? Is it itchy? Oh, it must be so itchy. Number 8, Matter Eater Lad. Matter Eater Lad, okay, he comes from the planet Bismol, not like Pepto-Bismol, which you may think it should be after reading this, where microbes made their food inedible and the population soon had to evolve or starve. Now, they didn't turn into farmers, they didn't create new food, they did, however, gain the ability to eat any and all matter. So now we have Matter Eater Lad, aka Tenzil Kem. He was part of that same crew with Sunboy and Stoneboy, you know, that fantastic Stoneboy we just talked about. The dude introduces himself to the team when he eats an old ray gun. He even says yum yum, like he likes the taste of an old ray gun. The team actually decides to use them. They're like, okay, well, he could just literally eat our way to freedom. And then even in the thought bubble, it shows him like eating a jail cell. And they're like, yeah, he's not wrong. It's pretty, we could use him. And then Tenzil even says, I know what's on your mind. I'm unusual. I don't qualify. No, Tenzil, what's on our mind is where does that food go after you yum yum eat it? Like, I'm no doctor, but an old ray gun, that can't feel good coming out. He's like, hey guys, look how many thumbtacks I can eat. The whole team's like, no, Tenzil, wait, no. Number 7, Multiple Man. James Madrox. He made his first appearance in Giant Size Fantastic Four issue 4, and his ability you probably just know by his name. He can make duplicates. He wasn't used very much in the X-Men, and he spent most of his days with X-Factor. Now, his powers may seem weak compared to gods and wizards, but this guy makes me ask a lot of questions, because at one point, James had 40 of him. There are 40 James running around town. That's a lot of James. So the duplicates feel, think, and act independently, but they're guided by the original James. So each of these duplicates manifests one aspect of James' personality, and the longer that they're away from the OG James, the more those traits become extreme. And if one of these duplicates passed away, he can sense the general area where the body is. But there's a logic question to be asked here. Like, for example, if he eats a handful of diamonds and then multiplies into 40 James, and then all those James did the Mama Bird method and, you know, puked up those diamonds, do they all have the same contents inside their stomach? Do we just make more diamonds? If so, we may have figured out a really gross solution to a lot of problems. Number 6, Swarm. Okay, meet Fritz von Meyer. He made his debut in Champions issue 14 back in 1977. And as you could probably guess by his name, he's a swarm of bees. How terrifying is that? He's made of 1,000 bees. This goes back to that one day where he was still just a German beekeeper and he found a beehive that was unlike any other hive he had seen. So he made a device that he hoped would reawaken these bees. And originally he thought that these bees were an end result of a mutation with a nearby fallen meteorite. So he was pumped about it. These were unique bees after all, because when he tried to capture the queen bee, the others just devoured him. They ate him. There were only bones left over. But now these bees were so special because now his consciousness was spread out throughout all all of these thousands of bees, and now you have the scariest villain ever. Just a man made of bees. Here, take my wallet, take my phone, whatever you want. Yeah, you're made of bees. I'm not gonna fight you. No way I'm throwing hands with 1,000 bees. Get out of town. Also, that must be extremely hard to do. I mean, he makes himself look like the shape of a human. That's extreme coordination.
Number 5, chaos magic. First of all, what really even is chaos magic? Who came up with this name? Also, these are no longer mutant powers that belong to Scarlet Witch. They allow her to alter reality and do all kinds of wacky stuff. 'Cause magic and 'cause comics. Magic is always a weird one to talk about because it never really needs to be as strongly defined as others. It's magic after all, so in a sense, almost anything can be possible. You can just be like, well, it's magic, so whatever. The most bizarre things about these powers and Scarlet Witch's character in general are the inconsistencies. In the MCU, her powers are nowhere near as powerful as in the comics, and her power levels even in the comics fluctuate all the time. Another inconsistency has been their origin, which has created some pretty big plot holes. Like, okay, so how did Hope use Scarlet Witch's power, or amplify Scarlet Witch's power, if you will, to help rid the world of the Phoenix Force if Scarlet Witch was never a mutant? Hope can only take mutant powers. Hope can only amplify mutant powers. So that doesn't make any sense anymore. Number 4, bad luck versus good luck, and probability. It's strange that comics even felt it necessary to grant Black Cat superpowers at all, but of course, as her name implies, she ended up getting bad luck powers added to her character, which caused those around her to experience bad luck. The weird thing is that shouldn't this then mean that because Black Cat's enemies have bad luck, she herself therefore has good luck? And therefore, that good luck should maybe help to eliminate the negative effects of the bad luck powers for the people that she cares for. But no, apparently your enemies having bad luck does not necessarily mean that you get good luck for you and your friends. You get good luck. No one else does. To be honest, the whole idea of probability as a power is confusing to me, and makes my head hurt just thinking about how much the world around you would actually have to be manipulated to make that superpower actually work. Although I will say, I do think luck is an awesome power to have, regardless of how illogical it seems to me at times. I just keep wondering when the mysterious stranger from Fallout is going to pop up and give Domino a hand in the comics. I always put a lot of luck into my characters when I'm playing on Fallout 4. When I create my characters, I put a lot into luck. I just think luck can be great. Also, do Black Cat and Domino's powers cancel each other out if they fight each other? Has this happened in the comics? Someone let me know. And if it hasn't happened, we need to make it happen with HeroClix. Number 3, phasing. Okay, so this one is less about the power being ridiculous, contradictory, or inconsistent because of writing. In other words, this non-understandable power is not really a why moment, but a how moment. Okay, well, it's kind of a why and a how, but it's coming from a place of mystery and actually really good writing, as opposed to some of the other powers mentioned on this list, which are kind of random. Captain Kate Pryde, as we know her now, or Kitty Pryde, or Shadow Cat, as we once knew her, has been struggling with her phasing powers lately in the comics. Now, I don't want to spoil anything for those of you who aren't caught up yet on the Marauders comics, so we're going to only talk about a mystery that is revealed in issue 1, talk about some stuff that happens sort of later, but I won't give anything away. And this mystery plot point that we're talking about is that Kate cannot enter Krakoa. Not just that she cannot use her powers, not just that, she can't even use her powers to phase through a gate or any other organic Krakoan matter. The answer as to why hasn't been revealed yet, but many speculate this unexplainable power restriction could actually have to do with Kate not really being a mutant. Now, what do you think? Are Kate's powers possibly not mutant in origin anymore? Also, if you want, one of the other things I'm talking about happens in Marauders issue number 6, and I would encourage you to check out that issue of Marauders if you're into this whole mystery thing. Also, just read all of Marauders. It's really good. You should read it. If you like Kitty Pryde, if you like Storm, sorry, Kate Pryde. Number 2, invisible jet. So while it's actually a piece of equipment and not really an inherent superpower, Wonder Woman has a lot of extra items that are iconic for granting her additional abilities or additional powers, like her bracelets and her lasso. Her invisible jet is also one of those items. Of course, course, an invisible plane sounds like an amazing thing to have. It allows you to fly and grants you the ability to sneak up on your enemies, except that it really isn't as stealthy as you'd think, as the pilot of the jet can actually be seen through the invisible exterior of the ship, meaning that on a clear day, you'd be able to see Wonder Woman approaching you from miles away, just flying towards you in like a seated position. So, not really initially as cool as it sounds, I think. Number 1, mostly invulnerable. Despite Kara Zor-El being a sometimes Kryptonian, of course depending on the storyline that you're reading. We won't go into all the convoluted origins that Power Girl has had. So with Power Girl from Earth 2 being more often than not associated with Kryptonian physiology, as opposed to Atlantean, which grants her super strength when powered by a yellow sun, you would expect that she would be super durable as well. After all, super strength without durability, it doesn't make much sense, as performing feats of strength could leave you crippled. And, you know, Superman's also super durable. And of course, she is invulnerable. However, there was a time when all it took to beat Kara was sticks and stones. That's right, she was invulnerable except for unprocessed materials, which doesn't really make any sense. No matter her heritage in the storyline, any way you slice it, it's a pretty weird stipulation to put on that power. You're telling me that if I fire a bunch of big guns and torpedoes at her, it'll do nothing, but if I throw like a rock at her head, she's done for? What the heck? Of course, Power Girl is also one of those characters who's really just had a rough go when it comes to weird changes to her character like this one. Thank you so much for watching, Nerd Squad. What are some of the hottest and most illogically powered female superheroes that you can think of? Who do you think are some of the hottest and most illogically powered female superheroes? What are some of the most illogical powers that you can think of for our sexy, sexy superhero ladies?
Number 10, Chamber. Chamber is a weird character, but also a beloved character. Like many weirdos that I love to talk about, Chamber is also a mutant. His name is Jonathan Starsmore, and while he may actually have the potential to be considered Omega level, that doesn't make his powers any less weird. His powers relate to the fact that he is actually made out of pure psionic energy, or at least he was once his mutant powers manifested. When his powers first manifested, as a result, they blew a massive hole in his chest and his face, basically blowing off his jaw. While many people would be immensely harmed or even killed by such an occurrence, Chamber was not. Jono, as a result, no longer needed to breathe, eat, or drink, and his blood even did not need to course through his veins to keep him alive. As such, he is typically seen with a scarf or some other piece of clothing covering the lower half of his face, because, you know, it's not there anymore, and he communicates telepathically, as his jaw was blown off when his powers first emerged. So, you know, kinda hard to talk without a jaw.
Number 9, Flatman. Flatman, or Matt to his friends, is a mutant with the power of being flat and being able to stretch his limbs. He got his start working as a Mr. Fantastic impersonator at parties before eventually deciding to go into the hero business himself, joining the Great Lakes Avengers, assuming the false identity of Dr. Val Ventura. In addition to his stretching powers, Flatman can also make himself nearly invisible by turning to the side. Now, Mr. Fantastic's powers barely make any sense and are weird, but Flatman takes this to a whole new level. Unlike Mr. Fantastic, he must remain two-dimensional when using his powers, which brings up a lot of questions about the placement of his internal organs. But he is well versed in a made-up fighting style he calls origami fu. So, make of that what you will.
Number 8, Beak. Beak is interesting in the sense that he has a physical mutation as a mutant, but one that is seemingly kinda useless. His mutation granted him wings and a beak, a bird-like appearance overall, but really these things are only an appearance alone. Beak does eventually manage to fly in the comics, but only after a long time trying to figure it out. And even then, he struggles really hard to do so, and can only fly for short distances at best. So he's no angel, if you know what I mean. Beak's real strength lies in his ability to be so likable. He makes friends easily and is usually more useful in that regard. What's even stranger though is you would think this might be challenging for someone like Beak, who, you know, looks pretty abnormal. However, this seems to have the opposite effect from what you'd expect, and instead of alienating people, Beak finds it all too easy to draw people near, relate to them, and make fast friends. But hey, he's a pretty nice guy, so I suppose when you really think about it, kinda does make sense.
Number 7, Forget-Me-Not. Not to be confused with the other Marvel character with the same superhero name who controls pheromones to make men fall in love with her, Poison Ivy style, Zabby has what could allegedly be called the power to be immediately forgotten by anyone he meets as soon as he leaves their field of vision. He was a member of the X-Men, although none of his teammates were aware of this most of the time. In fact, Professor X had to set up a psychic reminder to remind him once every hour that Forget-Me-Not existed. He had his uses and was especially good at reconnaissance missions, but once Xavier died, he became depressed and left the team. They didn't notice, despite the fact that he gave the eulogy. In the years since, he has taken up work on the mutant island nation of Krakoa as a detective, partnered with the Juggernaut. They make a good team considering that Juggernaut never remembers that he has a partner.
Number 6. Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist is known for his weird power, which when it first manifested, actually scarred the face of a young woman he happened to be making out with at the time. His power is that he has acidic vomit, which I'm not really sure how you could best utilize that, and it would definitely make for quite the hazard if you had the flu and you're feeling really nauseous. He wears a protective mouthpiece to help prevent any other dangerous cases from happening. Zeitgeist's acid vomit is powerful enough that it can actually burn through solid steel, but other than that, he is just somewhat more durable than your normal mortal human, which I guess makes sense. If you are someone who can vomit acid, you have to be fairly durable to even be able to do that and live. Axel Clooney is a mutant and used to be the leader of the X-Force at one point, but currently leads the rival team to Ecstatics known as the Excellent, which also, if you aren't reading the Excellent, you should check it out.
Number 5. Tag. Okay, I actually kinda wish I had Brian Cruz's power. It just seems like the perfect chaos creating ability. Tag's ability, known as the Pariah effect, allows him to use a form of telepathy when he touches someone that causes the target to emit a psionic signal, which would make them a target for others to run away from or to run towards. Whichever way people would run, they would do it while being fully aware of what they're doing, but unable to control themselves. If they were being controlled to run away, they would continue to do so until they were about 100 feet away. But if the signal caused them to run towards whoever it is, then they would dogpile on top of the target. What's strange is that he could also control who was affected by the ability. Like, how? He only made one person it, so how does he decide who runs away and who doesn't? He could also make whoever was it run away from themselves. So in other words, they would just run uncontrollably and in random directions, which is actually kind of hilarious. He also would always say, "You're it," which is kind of misleading because that person can't tag someone else to make them it, which is kind of unfair as well. So
Number 4. Dupe. Ranking a little lower for me because he's not necessarily a mutant maybe, is Dupe. Dupe is the creature who often is lumped in with the mutants, but maybe isn't one? We don't really know what Dupe is, never mind his power set. Dupe is basically an unstoppable force and has been implied to be a mutant, an alien, a mutant alien, or something else entirely. As of right now, his origin is classified on his own wiki with him being an artificial being, which really doesn't help to clarify anything. If he is a mutant, and I'm not saying conclusively that he is or that he isn't, as I still feel like his origin in general can be really contested at this point, his powers really are hard to classify. It's kind of like he's an old school superhero in the sense that he seems to have powers for whatever task he needs to accomplish at the time, including resurrection, the power of funk, love eyes, breaking the fourth wall, moving between panels, and even magic. Dupe has been spotted seemingly fighting alongside the mutants as recently as the AXE Judgment Day event, implying that he is at least allied with Krakoa. For those of you that don't think he's a mutant, I still kind of think he might be. Who knows?
Number 3. Hijack. The mutant known as David Bond has the oddly specific ability to control vehicular mechanisms with his thoughts. Basically, this is a form of technopathy, and he has been able to control automobiles and shield helicarriers, starting their engines, steering them, and even opening their doors. He has also been shown to be able to control high-tech suits of armor. Now, this kind of leads me to have more questions than anything else. Like, can he control motorcycles? What about bicycles? Rollerblades? Does the vehicle need to have an internal computer? What's the deal with opening and closing car doors? Does that not count as a form of telepathy? Why can he control high-tech suits of armor? What if a car has mechanical issues? Can he tell? Does the vehicle need to be in complete functioning order? Does it need to be able to turn on? I have so many questions and like no answers.
Number 2. I Scream. I Scream. Oh boy, what a wonderful weirdo this is. You know how much I have a strange affinity for mutants who have eye-based mutations and visual power sets if you're usually on this channel, and if you are usually on this channel, you should subscribe if you aren't already. But despite the I in Ice Cream's name, he is not one of those. Instead, his mutant power seems to be that he can turn himself into ice cream. Get it? Ice cream. He's only appeared once, I believe, in the comics, making a singular appearance in a strange comic in and of itself from Marvel, Obnoxio the Clown, issue number 1. In this weird single issue, Obnoxio is a clown and he's employed to act as entertainment for a surprise birthday party at the X-Mansion that is being hosted for young X-member Kitty Pryde. While this is going on, Ice Cream, a villain, also appears and sneaks into the mansion, hoping to coordinate a stealthy attack on the X-Men. Instead, he ends up attempting to get Obnoxio out of the way, which he kind of succeeds in, only to later be captured in a block of ice, because he can turn into ice cream. What I want to know is, what was Ice Cream's plan of attack with his power set? Is anyone on the main team featured here lactose intolerant? Was that his plan? I have to know.
Number 1. El Guapo. Tell me that someone, thanks to genetic mutation, can fold space or speak binary code or always win, and I'll look at you sideways, but I'll nod and walk away. But you tell me that some guy named Robbie Rodriguez, thanks to a genetic mutation, has no actual powers of his own, but instead has a symbiotic relationship with a superpowered flying skateboard, which followed his mental commands and sometimes even seemed to have a personality of its own or acted on his subconscious thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm done. Where did the skateboard come from? How did he discover this ability? When did this mutant power activate? Can he do this to other skateboards or inanimate objects in general? You can't just give someone the most unique and insane mutant ability and explain none of it. Coming in at number 10 is Iska the Unbeaten. This spot could as easily been taken by Domino, as Iska also has a form of limited psychokinesis, which is probability manipulation, or also known as the power of luck, which is probably one of the most unexplainable powers because we can't even say that luck is for sure a real thing. But Iska takes it one step further into ridiculousness with the power of being literally unable to lose. Iska has the power to always win, no matter what, whether that is individual one-on-one contests, votes, or wagers, or larger battles where she is a member of a group. In contests of skill, her powers might give her the talent she needs to win, or she might just win through, quote, improbable circumstances. In larger battles or wars, her powers detect the probability of both sides winning and have literally led her to defect from the losing side and join the winning side, meaning she still personally wins. It's not that we don't understand it, it's that it can't even properly be explained without sounding utterly ridiculous. Love Iska the Unbeaten though, great character. Number 9. Rainbow Girl. She is the first superpowered individual on this list affiliated with the Legion of Superheroes, but she definitely won't be the last. The team seems to be just a sticky flytrap for all the random and wacky superheroes out there in the universe. Unlike some others though, Rainbow Girl didn't actually make it onto that team as her powers were deemed not useful enough. Instead, she made it onto the Legion of Substitute Heroes, which I'm assuming is the Legion that villains either don't listen to or the Legion that just puts on a movie for villains to watch instead of just teaching them. Fighting them. Anyways, why is Rainbow Girl useless? Well, she can harness the emotional spectrum. Red for rage, orange for green, yellow for fear, green for will, blue for hope, indigo for compassion, and violet for love. But unlike the Lanterns, she has no ring to use the power through, and she cycles through the colors impulsively, meaning it leads to terrible mood swings. Number 8. Legion. David Haller was living in Paris with his mother when her home was invaded by a assassination team. They took out David's stepfather before his eyes, which kicked off his latent psionic powers, which he used to incinerate the brains out of the assassins. However, as he did so, he made telepathic contact with each of his victims, thus experiencing their thoughts and emotions as they died, which, as you can imagine, deeply affected David, forcing him into a catatonic state. The consciousness of the leader of the assassins, Jamail Karami, was absorbed and merged into David's mind. The terrible trauma that David had suffered had splintered David's personality into multiple alters, with each of these alters controlling a different psionic power. Because of this, Legion is an Omega level mutant able to create spontaneous mutations of different kinds that are accompanied by new personas or alter egos to govern each one of these new mutations. Now, David himself stated that he had in his mind 200 Omega level split personalities, but the X-Men Rogue stated that while she was insane side lesion, she was connected to thousands of types of powers, and there were more, quote, being born all the time. How this works, I have absolutely no idea, but it does, and he is scary. Number 7, Matter Eater Lad. Honestly, Tenzil Kem's power, one shared by his whole race, gives me more questions than it gives me answers. Matter Eater Lad's main shtick is that he can eat any substance of matter in any form, solid, liquid, or gas, in any amount at super speed. Bismalians, which are his race, come from a planet where over time microbes made regular food inedible. In turn, their species evolved to be able to eat any form of matter thanks to producing a variety of digestive enzymes that act on specific substances, making them easier to chew and digest. Bismalians can also metabolize food almost instantly, and if they gotta, they can consume tons of food in minutes. So where I am left confused is exactly where all that stuff goes. Not to get like too into it here, but what's Tenzil's bathroom situation like? Also dental. I'm assuming their teeth are of a denser material than human teeth. One Bismalian who was part of the Yellow Lanterns ate people, which caused him to get his teeth removed as punishment, but he then had those replaced with Bismalian steel, allowing him to bite through almost anything. So my question is, could he not bite through anything before? Also, if Tenzil eats a whole asteroid, which he has done before, where does he poop? I just have so many questions and like no answers. I would just one answer. Number 6, the Flash. Wally West is easily the fastest of all the speedsters out there. He has an almost spiritual connection to the Speed Force that allows him to do a great number of things, from traveling time to creating electrical energy constructs. Thanks to a heart condition, Wally has even been able to freeze time, which basically allows him to move at super speed without actually moving at super speed. And if you can explain exactly how that works to me, I will give you $1 single. That's all I got. The Speed Force is basically time, the representation of reality in motion, being the very cosmic force that pushes space and time forward. So how is it that people can hold chunks of it, or create lightning constructs with it, or absorb speed and momentum from other people or things? As a concept for time and a cosmic force, it is really hard to both wrap your head around it and explain the Speed Force and all the things that speedsters like Wally West and Barry Allen are able to do with it. You kind of just have to accept that this is what it is.
Number 5, Spider-Man. Spider-Man is one of the greatest superheroes of all time, but there has always been one thing about his powers that has confused fans over the years: his spider sense. To this day, people consider it to be one of his most inconsistent abilities, mostly because different writers have different ideas of how it works. Sometimes they can let him know exactly where danger is. Other times, he has no idea why it's going off, or knows why, but doesn't know where the danger is coming from. I mean, he has been able to dodge bullets or dodge attacks from behind, yet other times someone will just sneak up on him and he has no idea. Even in the films, it's been a source of debate. But this really all comes down to whoever is writing him. They just have different approaches to this specific ability. Number 4, Scarlet Witch. Wanda is one of the most powerful heroes in both the comics and the MCU. In the comics, she uses a form of chaos magic, in which she can warp reality. But in the films, her powers came from an Infinity Stone. In both versions, we still don't know exactly how her powers work. We know she uses magic, but the full extent of her powers is never really fully explained. She can wipe out almost the entire mutant population in the comics, or almost kill Thanos in the films. Reality warping is a near limitless power, so technically, with us only knowing that, she could essentially do anything. Scarlet Witch is such an amazing character in both the comics and films, so hopefully one day we learn a little bit more about her overall abilities. Number 3, Daredevil. Matt Murdock, the lawyer from Hell's Kitchen, and part of a show that was canceled way too soon. So, Daredevil actually has a similar problem to Spider-Man. His abilities have always been a bit inconsistent, specifically his radar sense. So, when Matt lost his sight, his other senses were all enhanced, to the point where he could technically see because his other senses were supercharged. They would create a picture of the world around him. But over the course of his superhero history, it has become a very inconsistent ability. Sometimes it can show him everything, other times not so much. Even in the TV show, which is amazing, it kind of changed from season to season, depending on the scenario. Although it did feel like they had a better grasp on it in the end, but unfortunately, we will never see how that would have continued. Number 2, Superman. Superman has a lot of powers. Some of them are very straightforward, while others are really not. For example, in the Superman film series, he was able to wipe away some of Lois's memories with a kiss, which people, call the amnesia kiss. Also, in Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, he was fighting Nuclear Man, and when Nuclear Man ends up destroying some of the Great Wall of China. Also, in Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, he was fighting Nuclear Man, and Nuclear Man destroys some of the Great Wall of China. So, Superman is able to repair it with his eyes. And I am not joking. Outside of his heat vision, he has repair broken structures vision. Like, where was this in all the other films? He just learned it now? Like, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. And that's not all. In the Silver Age Superman comics, Superman was able to create a miniature clone of himself that he shot out of his own hand. And this clone possessed all of his powers. Like, what? It doesn't really make any sense. And they ended up scrapping the idea later on because it never shows up again. Thank goodness. Number 1, the Century. The Century. People call him Marvel's Superman, but that really couldn't be farther from the truth. Aside from the S on his costume, they are nothing alike. Robert Reynolds is a complex character. He is not fully on one side. He has been a hero and a villain. His powers are limitless. He has super strength, super speed, invulnerability, regeneration, invisibility, matter manipulation, shapeshifting, telekinesis, telepathy, healing, and the list goes on and on. Nothing can kill him. I mean, he's even flown into the sun and he was just okay. He fought the Hulk and won. The dude is so powerful that even the smartest people in the Marvel Universe haven't found a way to actually kill him for good.
Number 10, godlike abilities. Donna Troy's Wonder Girl has had so many retcons to her backstory, it's really hard to keep track. But for the sake of this point, I would like to focus on the specific one where she was an orphan, saved, and raised on New Cronus before having her mind wiped and being returned to Earth as a young teen. Donna realized she had superhuman abilities and decided to join up with another team, the Teen Titans. In fact, the name came from a memory that Donna had from her life before she was returned to Earth. You see, while Donna didn't know it, she was actually one of the Titan seeds, chosen by the goddess Rhea. What is really strange about her powers in this one is that there weren't more questions or concerns surrounding where they came from at the time. Of course, now we know what was up with that storyline, but also the origins of her powers have flip-flopped so many times, you might have even forgot this one yourself. I also just think it makes a lot more sense when her powers actually come from magic. Or like, she was also made out of clay. It just, like, then makes a lot more sense. Just a random orphan. Number 9, power cloning. Or mimicking, power copying? Hope Summers possesses the ability to adopt any other mutant's powers within a certain distance to her. She clones or mimics their powers and has access to those abilities when they are at their strongest. Pretty cool, right? But it gets even cooler. As far as we know, there is no real limit to how many powers Hope can take on at once. And even better, her powers don't work the same as Rogue's powers, in the sense that other mutants she takes powers from won't find their powers drained, and she does not have to make physical contact with them in order to mimic their powers. One of her few weaknesses, because, I mean, they had to give her something, or she'd be way too powerful to make her even writable, are time and distance. But what I've wondered is, what does this mean when Hope takes on the powers of a teleporter? Let's say she took on Nightcrawler's powers, and she decided to travel to the moon. Could she do that? Would she make it all the way? Would her powers just conk out as soon as she got to, for example, the Brimstone dimension? How do these powers even work when she moves to another dimension? Is that far enough for them to stop working, or is that within range? There are a lot of unanswered questions. Would she even make it to the moon? Would she like get halfway there and then just like plop out of the air or something? All of these questions make me wonder exactly how the distance weakness applies exactly and what it means for Hope's insane mutant powers. Number 8, acid spit. Wait, what? Who is Acid Spit and is a super attractive female superhero? Why, Supergirl, of course. If you're not familiar with the storyline involving this one might throw you for a loop. After all, other Kryptonians like Superman can't spit acid, so what is up with this? Well, this power comes from a time when Supergirl was a Red Lantern, and it was through her power ring that she was granted this ability. So while you might not have understood this one before, hopefully that helps to explain it. Although, Supergirl as a Red Lantern to me is also a very strange idea, but it happened. Number 7, Canary Cry. Black Canary's Canary Cry is a confusing one because we've had so many different iterations of the character. Her Canary Cry has been a terrifying shriek that has been shown to destroy a building and possibly give someone brain damage. But then, as an alternative, it's also been shown as just like a simple distraction power. The power level fluctuates almost as much as the origins of the Black Canary character has. So, how powerful is the Canary Cry? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Is it super powerful? Is it only a little powerful? Where are we on the power levels there? Number 6, trichokinesis. Medusa of the Inhumans possesses the power to control her hair with a psychic field. She controls each strand using her hair to bind, attack, or even lift. The strange thing? Her hair has been shown to be even stronger than she is herself. All I can think to really make sense of how ridiculous this seems is that she must have a very good hair care routine for her hair to be as strong as it is. It has always made me wonder as well if it hurts if she breaks a strand of hair, or if it hurts to grow it, because I imagine it's gotta be thick. It's gotta be heavy too. Medusa has a lot of hair. How does she lift all that hair? How does her neck survive?
Number 5, Video Man. Video Man first appeared in Spider-Man Family featuring Amazing Friends #1. He is a giant, two-dimensional, 8-bit creature that only yells video game phrases like "Destroy all combatants!" He can shoot energy blasts from his arms that can blow up whatever they hit, which I can get on board with. But what makes him so confusing is that we're given zero context or explanation as to who or what he is or where he comes from. He just shows up and attacks Spider-Man and Iceman. At first I thought maybe he'd actually escaped from an arcade game, but once he's destroyed, the heroes discover an internal processor unit, which implies that he was created by someone and designed for the purpose of destruction. But who created him? More importantly, how did they create him? Will we ever find out in another appearance? No, because he never showed up again. Number 4, Hammerhead. Former mob hitman who was critically injured on a job gone wrong. Hammerhead was taken into surgery and given a steel alloy plate, which gave his head its distinctive odd appearance. Although this barely qualifies as a power, he is known to attack his enemies by literally charging headfirst into them. He regularly smashes his head into walls and takes blows to the head from Spider-Man, seemingly brushing them off due to the metal plate in his head. This makes no sense if you know anything about how concussions work. In extremely basic terms, a concussion is caused when your head gets hit and your brain bangs against the inside of your skull, thus damaging your brain. So, even if the steel plate prevents Hammerhead's skull from breaking, the sudden shock of smashing into a wall or taking a punch from a superhero with the proportionate strength of a spider would still cause him severe brain damage. It's why football players get concussions despite wearing helmets. Even once Hammerhead's brain was transferred into an adamantium skeleton by Mr. Negative, this same weakness would remain, as unlike vibranium, adamantium does not absorb the force of a blow. Number 3, Ruby Thursday. For some reason, Thursday Rubenstein thought it would be a good idea to replace her head with a red orb that can reshape itself into dangerous tentacles and spikes. She used these abilities to fight the Defenders as a member of the head-themed supervillain group known as the Headmen. Other abilities of the big red candy apple she calls a head are the ability to fire energy blasts and explode and reform. When concentrating really hard, she can also make the head take the form of a normal red-headed woman. Now, clearly nothing about Ruby Thursday makes sense, but this is the thing that really makes me scratch my head. Why is it harder for her to make the orb look like a head than it is for her to make it explode and reform? Come to think of it, why didn't she just make the head look normal to begin with? Number 2, Bizarro. A Superman villain with several different origins, sometimes being a clone, sometimes being from an alternate dimension, and sometimes being a duplicate created by the Joker when he had the ability to alter reality. Bizarro's deal is that he's the opposite of Superman in every way, including his speech. For example, if he was hungry, he would express this by saying something like, "Bizarro am full and no want pizza." He has superpowers, but in true Bizarro fashion, they manifest themselves as backwards versions of Superman's. So instead of heat vision and Arctic breath, Bizarro shoots ice beams out of his eyes and blows fire. What makes Bizarro's powers so confusing is the inconsistency that comes with them. His whole gimmick is supposed to be that he has the opposite powers of Superman, yet unlike Superman, he still has super strength and speed. You might think that I'm reading too much into this, but in All-Star Superman number 8, when Superman visits the Bizarro world, he sees a Bizarro version of the Flash, who boasts that he has a top speed of 2 inches per hour. So, by this logic, Bizarro should be weak and unable to fly, yet he still manages to consistently hold his own in fights with Superman. As Bizarro would put it, that makes perfect sense. Number 1. Kangaroo. When he was a child, Frank Oliver was obsessed with kangaroos. He would study them from a distance and even spent time living among them so that he could learn to mimic their abilities. When he grew up, he became a criminal who used his jumping abilities to commit robberies and then leap away like a kangaroo. Although he was later given augmentations that heightened his abilities, in his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 81, he's just a normal human who can jump like a kangaroo. That's a bit far-fetched, even for a comic book. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he studied kangaroos so well that he learned to jump just as well as them. It still doesn't add up. Let's crunch some numbers. A kangaroo can leap a distance of about 25 feet, which is undeniably impressive. Now, the long jump world record is around 29 feet, so it is conceivable that a human could accomplish that. However, the maximum height a kangaroo can jump is 6 feet, yet in his first appearance, we see Frank consistently and easily leaping at least 15 feet high. For reference, the current high jump world record is just over 8 feet. That would be impossible for a kangaroo, let alone some regular Australian dude.
Number 10. Luktuka the Knower. Luktuka is a strange new character who I kinda love. Their powers are very interesting and unique. Luktuka in essence knows the location of everything and anything. Being considered as an Omega level mutant, as so many are in Arako who sit on the Great Ring, Luktuka resembles a night sky, looking like a sheet covered in stars with fabric that's made up from the cosmos. So cool! Luktuka's powers also might not seem so great in the sense that, you know, spatial awareness, while useful, isn't exactly considered powerful even when it's on a cosmic and universal scale, possibly even multiversal. Although the amount of times I've put down my phone and not known where it is, when it's even in my hand, I feel like having someone that you could just be like, yo, where's my phone? And they could be like, no, it's right there. That would be pretty useful. However, when combined with the powers of a teleporter, while still strange, Luktuka's powers could be seen as exceptionally great, because then you can just like teleport anywhere. It's crazy.
Number 9. Cypher. Cypher has what some people believe to be a pretty horrible mutant ability, especially when it comes to combat. Personally, I would kill to be able to subconsciously translate any written or spoken language, human or alien. He can also subconsciously understand body language and intention, as well as decipher codes and computer languages. After he was resurrected, and also so Marvel could make him actually useful, everything he sees is interpreted into language, basically making him able to read life. Everything I just said is strange enough, but I can wrap my head around it to some degree, I guess. But don't you dare sit here and tell me that this man can speak binary code. In New Mutants Volume 3, number 14, a guy operating a mech comes upon Cypher during a battle, and Dougie Boy speaks to the mech saying, "Hello, you don't have to do this. You know, I can set you free, show you how to think for yourself." The dude operating the mech understands him, since he's speaking English, but for some reason, the mech, which isn't artificial intelligence, also understands him, boots the operator out, and begins talking in zeros and ones. What?
Number 8. Manifold. If you thought Luktuka was an interesting character, wait till you hear about Manifold. Although with Luktuka being newer, you may already know of Manifold, because Manifold's been around for a while. But do you know how exactly his powers work? That is what is so cool, but can also be kind of confusing. Manifold is seen as a massively powerful teleporter, but the interesting thing is he actually isn't. I mean, he is really powerful, but he's not technically a teleporter. Instead, Eden Vesey's mutant powers are based in communication, specifically communication with space. He is considered a universal shaper who can basically communicate with the universe over 616 and ask it to bend and fold for him, which is how he appears to teleport himself and others such great distances. But really, it's just talking.
Number 7. Thumbelina. Christina Anderson has an ability that quite a few characters in comic books have. That would be the ability to shrink. Thumbelina can reduce herself down to about 1/4 of an inch tall. That ability is perfectly fine in my eyes. Like I said, lots of characters can do this. My problem with Thumbelina, and also some other shrinkers, is how the heck do they retain their full-size strength when they get smaller? Or in Thumbelina's case, how the hell does she get stronger when she shrinks? I'm sorry to try and bring physics into any debate about superheroes and their various powers, but it makes absolutely no sense in the laws of physics that someone who is smaller can be more strong than they were when they were regular size. Ants, for example, if they were the size of a person, they would be insanely strong, as they are able to carry 20 times their body weight. So that's like an average person being able to carry like a small SUV or something. But since ants are so damn small, that means they can carry like a leaf or something. Thumbelina should not be able to knock someone out when she is a quarter of an inch tall. I'm sorry, that's all I gotta say.
Number 6, Iska the Unbeaten. Iska's powers are really cool, don't get me wrong, but how does it work exactly? I feel like we still have a lot of exploring to do with this character before we can really firmly answer that question. I've been reading Iska since she came into the comics and I'm still confused. Iska made her first appearance during the 2020 X-Men series, appearing in a tie-in issue to the X-Men crossover event 10 of Swords, which I still personally hold a great fondness for. As such, I also hold a fondness for this character, the sister-in-law to Apocalypse through his mutant wife Genesis. Iska is a mutant of the long-lost mutant island of Araco, and her powers allow her to always win, but sometimes they also force her to always win, like against her will, and then other times, betting against her even can affect the result of a contest, even if she herself isn't involved in that. How does that work? Her powers also do not just extend to physical fights, but all means of competition. So like, if you're, I don't know, doing a coin toss with Iska, she gotta win.
Number 5, gold balls. Can you guess what gold balls is able to shoot out of his body? If you guessed gold balls, congratulations! Fabio Medina discovered this really odd mutant power while falling victim to a robbery in San Diego. Armed with his gold balls and his signature catchphrase, gold balls, Fabio took the world by storm as the newest member of the X-Men. Now, his powers don't make sense when you think about them too hard. Where are these balls coming from? How are they being formed so quickly? You know, the kind of weird stuff that applies to a lot of superheroes. But what sends Fabio into the realm of the bizarre is the fact that it was eventually discovered that the gold balls were actually infertile eggs that he was producing and shooting at people. In light of this news, Fabio retired the name Gold Balls and started calling himself Egg.
Number 4, Stone Boy. I think it says it all when you belong to a team with the words substitute heroes in the title. Dag Wentham is known as Stone Boy, and he belongs to the team known as the Legion of Substitute Heroes. He is an alien from the planet Zwen who can transform into a stone form, becoming super strong and super durable, but also immediately it makes him unable to move, rendering him completely immobile. Yeah, so not super useful in combat if you want to like actually do anything or beat someone, but pretty useful I guess if you just want to survive? Let me put it another way. Stone Boy also has not been spotted since the New Earth continuity existed. I think that tells you just how ridiculous his abilities are. So ridiculous that we can't even seem to find a place for him in the massive universe that is the Prime Earth continuity. And this is even after he finally manages to gain some ability in a possible future to move somewhat while in his stone form, post 0 hour that is.
Number 3, 3D Man. When the Skrulls abducted test pilot Chuck Chandler, the human proved more wily to deal with than they anticipated. He tried to escape on his rocket plane, but accidentally caused an explosion that destroyed both the Skrull ship and Chuck. Bizarrely, Chuck's brother Hal witnessed the explosion, which caused Chuck to become a two-dimensional being living in Hal's glasses, imprinting an image of Chuck in each lens. If you think that doesn't make much sense, just you wait. When Hal wears the glasses and concentrates really hard, he can merge the two images of his brother, causing Chuck to emerge as the 3D Man. When freed from the glasses, 3D Man has 3 times his normal physical abilities because, you know, 3D. As an extra bonus, Hal falls into a coma every time 3D Man comes out of his glasses, only waking back up when his brother returns to the glasses. This is a confusing and convoluted gimmick that doesn't really seem worth it if all it does is free a hero who's not particularly useful. Also, the name 3D Man must be confusing for characters who don't know every detail about his life. I mean, most things are in 3D, right?
Number 2, Arm Fall Off Boy. Arm Fall Off Boy has to be one of the weirdest ones out there. Unlike another odd hero, Bouncing Boy, who eventually in the Prime Earth continuity achieved his dream, Arm Fall Off Boy has never made the cut for the Legion of Superheroes. And that's saying something, considering that the Legion of Superheroes themselves are kind of a weird superhero team by all definitions. Arm Fall Off Boy has the power to detach his limbs, which he typically then attempts to use to beat his enemies with. I mean, it's pretty cool that he can remove his limbs and survive, but it's less cool that really all he does from there is use his arm or his leg as a weapon. Especially as this means he now has less limbs to like move himself with in combat, so that's really pretty silly. And so is the onomatopoeia that is often used to describe the sound of his power. Plorp. What a great onomatopoeia.
Number 1, Fluff. First appearing in excellent number 3, Fluff probably takes the cake for having the most confusing, disgusting, and odd power I've seen in a long time. Fluff is able to generate bucket loads of belly button lint at will and vary its chemical composition. Now first off, ew. Secondly, belly button lint is just stray clothing fibers that come off of your clothes and collect in your belly button. Trust me, I know. Fluff wears a costume with a very deep V, which allows his navel to feel those sweet summer breezes, which means that he wouldn't have any belly button lint, which begs the question, what exactly is he shooting out of his little tum-tum? You're free to speculate in the comments, but I refuse to give this character one more second of thought.
Number 10, the Phantom Stranger. The Phantom Stranger comes from the DC universe and is a character that is, well, very mysterious. I mean, his true origins have never been technically revealed. He has a lot of powers and is said to be one of the most powerful characters in the DC universe. His powers include immortality, spell casting, illusion casting, reality manipulation, teleportation, dimensional travel, mental awareness, transmutation, and spectral sight. It's a lot. No one knows where he has gotten all these powers though. Well, not officially, that is. He has had a few different origins over the years. One was that he was a fallen angel who decided to stay neutral during Lucifer's rebellion against heaven. Another theory is that he is a remnant of a dead universe. Another is that he was a man named Isaac who had a wife and daughter around the time, when Jesus would have been a child. When the king sent out soldiers to kill all the young male kids in an attempt to kill Jesus. Unfortunately, some of the casualties were his wife and son. He then blamed Jesus for this. He tried to take revenge on him, and because of this, Jesus sent him to walk the earth until doomsday. And another one was that he was alive during biblical times, and that one day he tried to commit suicide, but angels did not allow it. They stopped him from entering the afterlife and forced him to walk the earth for eternity, which showed him what he was meant to do: turn away humanity from evil. So, Phantom Stranger is a bit confusing, but that doesn't make him any less cool. Number 9, Legion. David is a very powerful mutant. He's the son of Charles Xavier, aka Professor X. Now, it would be kind of impossible to list all of his powers because, well, he has so many, with more being added all the time. How is this possible? Well, let me explain. You see, David is an Omega level mutant with dissociative identity disorder, which means he has multiple personalities. Each of these personalities have their own abilities. So, one has telekinesis, while another has super strength, while another can shoot acid gas, while another can teleport. Another can warp reality, and the list goes on and on. At one point, Rogue said while she was trapped inside of Legion that she saw thousands of personalities, all with unique powers, and more being created every single day. It's kind of crazy and almost makes him an unstoppable character, although being able to control and tap into those abilities is another thing entirely. Number 8, Hope Summers. Hope Summers is the daughter of Nathan Summers, aka Cable. She was born during a time when, well, mutants weren't supposed to be born, which is why a lot of people call her the Mutant Messiah. Now, Hope has the power of the Phoenix Force. Now, Hope has had the power of the Phoenix Force at one point, but that is not what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about what her powers are on her own. You see, she has the power of superpower manipulation. Basically, she can control any power of a mutant that's around her. Now, when Hope was born, Cerebro detected her and then blew up, like she straight up destroyed it. Why? Well, that was never 100% clear, but people say it's because how powerful she was. Regardless, it happened and it was a really big deal. After that, she couldn't be detected by any mutant detecting equipment. So now that leaves a lot of fans asking if she is even a mutant at all, which makes things even more complicated. Number 7, Longneck. Longneck, also known as William Hanover, is a mutant who made his first and only appearance during New X-Men issue 140. He was one of the mutants that ended up losing his powers during M-Day. His powers are very weird and don't really make a lot of sense. He has a long neck. That's literally it. Why is that his power? And what purpose does it really serve is anyone's guess. The character hasn't shown up again since, so at this point all we can do is theorize about it. What do you guys think Longneck can do with his powers? Put those theories down below. We need to figure this out. Number 6, Choir. Irana Clayton is a mutant, also known as Choir. She first appeared in New X-Men issue 119. Her power is that she has 3 extra mouths all over her neck, and these mouths can make her sound different, or even make her sound like she's talking in a completely different location. I mean, that could be useful in certain scenarios, but not really overall. She ended up losing her powers later on because of what a Scarlet Witch did on M-Day, so she really doesn't have to worry about, using them anymore. But still, that doesn't really stop us from wondering what the point of that power really was.
Number 5, the Hulk. Everyone knows Hulk's ability to turn into a big old green monster and rip things apart with a strength that increases based on his anger. But what many of you may not know is that Hulk actually possesses a much more subtle ability to see astral projections and ghosts and even interact with them if he chooses. Hulk's astral form perception has come in handy when working with Doctor Strange as a defender. But why does Hulk have this ability? Well, Bruce Banner subconsciously feared his father's ghost would come back to haunt him, like literally come back to haunt him. And so the Hulk just developed this mechanism to allow him to look out for that ghost, and I guess other ghosts as well. There isn't really more to it. Hulk just developed the ability that is something usually reserved for telepaths. For the super intelligent Bruce Banner, it would make a bit more sense, but it's been suggested that for Bruce, the clarity of the astral forms is diminished when compared to the telepathically resistant Hulk's ability to view them. With Immortal Hulk and the connection to the One Below All, perhaps that could serve as some kind of fan explanation, but we don't have a real one, so no. Number 4, Jin Genie. Jin Genie was a mutant, but unlike almost any other mutant ever, her powers were directly dependent on how much alcohol she consumed. Becca Parker had the power to generate seismic vibrations proportionate to her amount of alcoholic intake. As you can imagine, being intoxicated in order to use your superpowers can be rather interesting. It seems like one of those things you should add to the list of things you shouldn't do while under the influence. Like, don't drive, don't operate heavy machinery, don't use your superpowers to cause seismic vibrations. That kind of thing. Unfortunately, we do not get to see her use her powers that much, or get an explanation for why alcohol fuels said powers, because Jin Genie is de-lifed in the same comic that she was introduced in. X-Force number 116 in July 2001. Number 3, Superman. Back in the day, while Superman was a fairly new being, he would kind of have whatever superpower he wanted / needed at the time, until eventually his set table of powers was established. But there is one new power that appeared in 1958, Superman number 125, where Superman learned to fire a tiny version of himself out of his hands. After discovering a tiny spaceship that blows up in his face, Superman loses all of his abilities minus, interestingly, his invulnerability. Luckily, he gained the ability to literally fire a doll-sized version of himself out of his hand that had all of his powers and would go and beat up criminals or melt icebergs. What's hilarious is that Superman even got jealous of the little mini him. When a guided missile was on its way to the Eiffel Tower, he sent out his little buddy and an onlooker shouted, "How cute!" To which he said, "Cute? What nonsense!" Fortunately for Superman, his mini-me was destroyed by a kryptonite meteorite and Superman's powers were restored to him. Number 2, Color Kid. Ulu Vac from the planet Lupra is the hero known as Color Kid, and his name does indeed suit his abilities. Vac was struck by a multicolored beam of light from another dimension that granted him the incredible power to alter the color of objects and people, and that is literally all he can do. It's stated that this power is probably caused by him changing the spectrum of light around the person or thing, but there are no real explanations given. It also does absolutely nothing for him or anyone else. Color Kid decided to use this power to go and audition to be a member of the Legion of Superheroes, and what do you know, he was rejected from the team and his powers were deemed useless. While it may be true, it feels a little bit mean, but at least he got in with the Legion of Substitute Heroes, so there's that. And in at number 1 is El Guapo. Robbie Rodriguez, who goes by El Guapo, is a mutant from the Marvel Universe. But that kind of opens up a whole bunch of questions because Robbie doesn't seem to have any powers of his own, unless you consider his symbiotic relationship with his flying skateboard a superpower. His wiki page refers to this as a idiosyncratic manipulation, suggesting that Robbie actually has total control over his skateboard. But the problem with that statement is that his skateboard also acted with a mind of its own, like when it beat him up for cheating on his girlfriend. Now, an argument could be made that perhaps it's his own subconsciousness beating himself up for doing the wrong thing, but that's just a me theory, and Marvel did not state this to be true or even explain his ability at all, really. It's not telekinesis, and the board seems to have a mind of its own. I don't know, you tell me what you think.
Number 10, Tattooed Man. Mark Richards was a former Marine who was presumed dead before showing up in Gotham as a killer for hire with the ability to make his tattoos come to life as projections, which then attack his enemies. He explains his powers as being due to a magic process called sin grafting, which takes the sins of his victims and makes them into tattoo monsters. Now, that's comic booky and fun, but that's also incredibly vague. Why are sins turning into tattoos? Which sins are worth a tattoo monster? I don't know, it's just weird to me that none of the heroes or villains he comes across ever seem to ask any follow-up questions. Number 9, the Fisherman. Fisherman is an Aquaman villain who often works as a smuggler, running weapons to Atlantean rebels and using trained dolphins to run drugs into France. He uses a large fishing pole with super strong fishing line to attack and tie up his enemies, as well as a series of specialized lures that blow up or shoot gases at his enemies. Dumb, but pretty straightforward. What makes him so confusing is that it has since been revealed that his helmet is actually a sentient parasite that takes over their host's mind and makes them commit fishing-related crimes. Kind of like if Venom was a retired dad. What I don't get about this is why would a parasite give its host the ability to be good at fishing? Was the parasite formed in a Bass Pro Shop? Backstory and the theme of this villain just do not match. In case you're thinking, maybe it was the host's idea to go with the hobbyist theme. Each time the parasite has bonded with a new host, that person has also taken on the identity of the fisherman. So it is the parasite's choice to continue with the fisherman theme. Number 8, Swarm. Fritz von Meyer was a Nazi scientist who came across an irradiated beehive and began experimenting on the bees, hoping that he would be able to control them to do his bidding. The experiment went wrong and the bees turned on him, devouring Fritz. As he was eaten by the bees, his consciousness was spread between all the bees in the hive. So he was granted control of the bees, but at a weird, twisty cost. He uses this ability to control bees, to form them into a body-like shape, and tries to cleanse the earth of all humans. He can also form other shapes out of bees and use them to attack people. I don't get it. I mean, radioactive or not, why would getting eaten by bees, who only eat pollen, by the way, cause you to become a hive mind? Look, he's a very visually interesting villain, but he raises a lot more questions than he answers. Number 7, Mr. Mxyzptlk. Mr. Mxyzptlk is a 5th-dimensional being who has developed an obsession with Superman, and he likes to spend his time harassing the Man of Steel and putting him through various ordeals for his own amusement. He can fly, teleport, and create essentially anything he likes just with a thought. He's also a character with cosmic awareness, sometimes speaking directly to the reader as though he's aware of his place in a comic book. A lot of his powers are explained by saying that he can manipulate reality. However, what's weird is his weakness is that if someone tricks him into saying his name backwards, he's forced to return to the 5th dimension for 90 days and undo any damage that he caused. Look, if he can do what he wants, why does that work? This is a creature that can bend reality to his will, yet he's repeatedly brought down by saying a word. Is this self-imposed? Is he just trying to be a good sport? Neither would surprise me, but the only thing I know for sure about Mr. Mxyzptlk is that nothing he does really makes sense. That's kind of the point. Number 6, Polka Dot Man. Although he doesn't technically have superpowers, this villain's gimmick is too confusing not to get into. Polka Dot Man commits crimes by tearing off the various colored dots on his costume, throwing them, and then letting them expand and morph into the various gadgets that he needs. For example, he can tear a dot off, transform it into a buzzsaw blade, and throw it at Batman and Robin as he escapes on a flying saucer, as he does in his first appearance in Detective Comics number 300. Well, I can suspend my belief when I see Batman pull whatever he needs out of his utility belt. The idea of Polka Dot Man being able to carry around full vehicles on his costume is just too much. What makes it even more confusing is we've never received any explanation for how this works. His origin and powers were altered and frankly improved in the live-action adaptation of The Suicide Squad, where it was revealed that his mother had been a scientist at Star Labs who had exposed him to an alien virus in an attempt to give him superpowers. This resulted in him being able to cast glowing colored dots that destroyed whatever they came into contact with.
Number 5, Arm Fall Off Boy. He made his first appearance in Secret Origins Volume 2, Issue 46. His real name isn't even known, so now we have to call him Arm Fallout Boy. Fall Off Boy. His powers are just that. He can take his arms off and use them as weapons. Now, he tried to enlist as a member of the Legion of Superheroes, but was rejected. He was actually the first reject. Matter Eater Lad said that he got these oddly specific powers because he was careless when holding the anti-gravity metal element 152, but it's hard to tell if he was serious. His arms aren't robotic arms, like Bucky Barnes, for example. His arm can actually come off and then you can use it as a metal weapon. Sure, that's great, but it doesn't make a plorp sound, you know? So he takes his own arm off, hits people with his wet shoulder blade, and then just plorps it back on. Wouldn't it be damaged? Also, would he feel the pain as soon as he connected it back to his body and his brain? All the questions. Also, ew. Number 4, Songbird. Melissa Gold made her comic book debut in The Incredible Hulk issue 449. She ran away from her parents at a young age, and whilst developing a hard knock life attitude, she ended up becoming a professional wrestler, giving herself the stage name Screaming Mimi, and then soon joined the wrestling group Grapplers. So the Grapplers were doing great, they were killing it, but they weren't making the same amount of money as the male wrestlers. So they had to take on a new job now, with the Roxxon Oil Company. Now, because of Quasar, the mission went horribly and the Grapplers were tried and jailed. Melissa was given vocal cord implants that provided her with acoustic kinesis, hence her first nickname, Screaming Mimi. She can make all these crazy weapons with her voice as well, and even has the ability to craft herself wings with her voice and fly. Somehow. She joined the Masters of Evil in Avengers issue 271, but when she could no longer use her powers, Zemo came in with his accomplice, the Fixer, and gave her new powers with neck implants. Her sound energy is pretty cool, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. She can create solid weapons and force fields, and she can even go as far as to make herself undetectable by others. Fascinating, yes. Confusing. Also yes. Number 3, Bouncing Boy. He made a spectacular arrival to Action Comics in issue 276. He's a member of that Legion of Superheroes that I keep mentioning. So yes, this guy made it through, and the dude who used his arm as a Nerf bat was rejected. What a world, okay. So Chuck Tane was born on Earth, and he has this unique ability where he can inflate like a beach ball and bounce around. The combination of invulnerability and velocity makes him quite the unit. He got these powers by accidentally drinking a super plastic formula that he thought was soda pop. Does he have to be round? Does he have to bounce around? I feel like his powers are not really specific here. If he's strong and unstoppable, can he just inflate himself a little bit and then fight like a normal person? Like, can he make his fist into extreme sock and boppers and then boing, like they'll bounce away, and then boing, and they'll bounce away? It was a little bit better than being a beach ball than bouncing around like that chick from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That sounds like a nightmare. You get a lot more done than being the beach ball of doom, is all I'm saying. Number 2, Jin Genie. Becca Parker was one of the X-Force members. She was introduced in issue 116. Her powers don't make a lot of sense, but they're so fun and specific that I have to talk about her. So the more alcohol in her system she has, the more powerful she becomes. She probably kills it at holiday office parties, eh? Wow. She's the first one going home at like 9 p.m. You're like, really? Oh, Jin Genie, that makes sense. Jin Genie has the power to generate seismic vibrations depending on how much she drinks. Now, it's not specified how this works. Are we talking about the amount you drink or the percentages? Because this one, we could maybe find a solution in time. Finally, number 1, Animal Vegetable Mineral Man. So as crazy as his name sounds, that's just it. He made his first debut in DC Comics with Doom Patrol issue 89. Swedish scientist Sven Larsson gained these incredible powers after falling into a vat of mysterious amino acids. So now he can change any part of his body into any animal, any vegetable, or any mineral. And he can do them at the same time. It doesn't have to be one of them. It can be all of them at the same time and on different body parts. How insane and overpowered is that?
Spotlight is on Steve Larson, also known as Animal Vegetable Mineral Man. He was attacked by his secondary dinosaur head during a robbery gone wrong.
So not only does this not make any sense at all, but this is insane. This guy should never lose a fight. The possibilities are literally endless. The fact that he can somehow control all 3 at the same time as well, like your mind must be amazing.
Number 10, Sonic Flight. Even with Sean Cassidy's accepted superhuman vocal stamina, this ability appears to be an odd one that doesn't really make a ton of sense. Banshee can produce a sonic scream, which he can use as a form of sonar, to injure those he fights with in battle and to shield himself or others, or disorient his enemies. Sure, that makes sense, but he also uses his sonic scream to fly, which would make sense if he were just using the ability to say, fly up to the 2nd story of a building. But he has used this ability to fly longer distances as well, like over the ocean and stuff. However, in order to remain altitude and stay in the air, he has to keep screaming. So wait, how does he breathe? Well, we know he has enhanced vocal stamina, but this still doesn't really explain long trips. The answer is that he uses a winged gliding suit that allows him the time he needs to apparently breathe. However, without his winged gliding suit, his sonic flight powers would be pretty much useless. So yeah, kind of a weird ability. Number 9. Tentacles. Tentacles. Not to say that tentacles are inherently bad, by the way, they aren't, but what they are is kinda random, especially in this case. The tentacles I wanted to talk about here were Callisto's random tentacles. Callisto never really had tentacles until the early 2000s, but where did they come from? After all, she was introduced in the 1980s without them, and they just kinda seemed to appear one day. Mask was to blame for this alteration to Callisto's look, though she still had her famous eye patch at the time. She has never lost that, by the way. Mask gave Callisto tentacles to torment her. After he was defeated once more, she decided to actually keep them instead of be changed back. Not because they were useful, but because she refused to bargain with Mask anymore, so she just decided to accept them. She was like, I'm cool with these tentacles. The super weird thing is, although they were not a mutation of her own, they still disappeared along with her powers during the events of M-Day. Huh?
In at number 8, he can survive nuclear holocausts. In the one-shot comic book called Hulk: The End, we see Bruce Banner and the Hulk roaming a desolate version of Earth that has suffered a war that ended due to a violent nuclear holocaust. Hulk and Banner are the last ones remaining alive, all thanks to the Hulk, who is invulnerable enough to survive the fallout. Banner and the Hulk actually despise each other though, and eventually Banner lets himself die, unable to live like that anymore. After Bruce passes on, the Hulk is trapped. If he ever turns back into Banner, he would die as well. It is all very tragic. But the reason why we take you to this depressing timeline is to discuss the fact that the Hulk's invulnerability and endurance allows for him to survive in such harsh environments, to outlive the effects of mass nuclear radiation. He actually grows stronger from more radiation, making exposure to deadly amounts of radiation a beneficial thing for him, although it does tend to drive him insane, but more on that later.
Number 7. Unlimited magics. I feel like people often forget that Illyana Rasputin's real mutant power is teleportation. She's a teleporter. And yet we all get more wrapped up in her magical abilities, her soul sword. Magic actually only has such powerful magical abilities because she was kidnapped by Belasco when she was very little, which is pretty weird. Just because she was tied to Limbo through her teleportation powers, where Limbo is basically a stepping stone for her while teleporting, she now just has unlimited magical power? Huh? Also, that whole story of Belasco kidnapping young Illyana, basically torturing her, and yet admiring and cherishing her as his protege all at the same time is just pretty odd and nonsensical to begin with. Number 6. Flaming prehensile tongue. Toad has all sorts of odd abilities, but one of the most bizarre and odd by far is his prehensile tongue. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but Amanda, he's Toad. Sticky prehensile tongue should make sense for any amphibian-based mutants. But what about when we decide to make it flaming? Yeah, I know, right? That's weird. That was an update that Toad's tongue saw in the comics. Why? I guess because it looks cool. But his tongue was already not a super useful power to have, and adding flames, it doesn't really make it any more useful. Does make it look cooler though, I guess.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else.
Number 5. Eggs. There's a few occurrences of this with mutants. Angel Salvador has this ability due to her insect physiology. It doesn't really do much as a power for her, it's just part of the way that she reproduces. Though it is pretty creepy and a little gross. But then again, so is most stuff involving the creation of new life, am I right? One of the other now remarkably famous mutants who have had this weird ability? Gold Balls, who now actually goes by the name Egg. He actually changed his code name due to the revelation regarding his powers. Originally, we just thought Gold Balls emitted gold bouncy balls out of his body, which seemed pretty odd and well, kinda useless. But then we realized in the events of Dawn of X that these gold balls were actually infertile eggs, which is also kinda useless. Unless, that is, you have the other 4 insanely powerful members of the mutant group known as the Five around you. When matched up with Elixir, Tempest, Hope Summers, and Proteus, Egg's abilities revealed themselves as being mighty useful, as together the 5 can combine their power sets in order to resurrect any of their fallen comrades. Still weird, but also kinda now amazing?
Number 4. Carnage. Speaking of Carnage. I mean, the longer a character's history, the greater the chance that things might get pretty out there for the character. Like when Carnage and Venom randomly displayed the ability to travel through the internet in the 90s. But one of the other crazier abilities we've seen is the ability for Carnage to control another person's mind. And I'm not just talking about the usual back and forth bonding here between symbiote and host, though I feel like Cletus and a symbiote, when we're talking about Carnage, are really a combo team. No one is really vying for control. The decisions they actually make together, and those decisions are both equal parts theirs. Whereas Venom has always said, "We are Venom," implying some independence between Brock and his symbiote, Carnage always refers to itself as one single entity, fully merged. I am Carnage. What I'm talking about here is what we've seen with Carnage both in Volume 1 and later in Volume 2, when it recovered these powers, exhibiting the ability to control or influence others' minds. It almost completely took control of Stark's mind and suit in Carnage Volume 1, Issue 5, which we've seen other symbiotes do this, but it's not a power you see very often. Where does it come from? Why does it exist? Because it comes from Null?
Number 3. Hollow bones. Speaking of flight-related mutations, one common trait that you'll see presented as a power or a perk is hollow bones. Angel and Beak both have hollow bones. What it's supposed to help with in regards to those mutants is help them accomplish the ability to fly. And I mean, usually it does by making them significantly lighter, but also hollow bones sound like something terrible to have in the midst of a battle. Somehow Angel has been presented as being very durable, despite the fact that his hollow bones have to exist in order for his flight powers to work and make sense. But if his bones are hollow, then shouldn't punches from foes with super strength cripple the poor original X-Men team member? Like what?
My only regret is that I have bonitis.
Number 2. Become ice cream. So far we've only seen this very specific mutant power once, and only in one single issue, and not even an issue of X-Men either, but instead Obnoxio, the Clown's own series. One issue series. The mutant who possessed this ability? Ice Cream. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I know, a very original name. Ice Cream. Ice Cream used his abilities to infiltrate the X-Mansion, planning to put an end to the super team because their abilities made him feel ridiculous by comparison. I mean, I don't blame him. How he expected to accomplish this, however, with his power set being so useless, well, I have no idea. Number 1. Love Eyes. In all new Dupe, we gotta learn even more about Dupe's capabilities. Well, we don't really know what Dupe is still exactly. He has been a member of the X-Men, and hasn't been confirmed either way in regards to his mutant status, or, well, any other status for that matter. We don't know if he's an alien, or if he was made in a lab, or what's really going on with him. None of it's really fully been confirmed. What we do know is that he has a slew of insanely powerful and ridiculously cartoonish abilities. One such ability is Love Eyes, which seems to have no real specific purpose. Kitty Pryde suspected that he was using his love eyes to try and enchant her, casting a love spell on her, but Dupe claimed that they're just how he shows affection. Ineffective love spell or just a weird quirk. Either way, they're pretty irrational.
In at number 10, vampirism. Vampire Hulk? Yes, that's an actual thing. How the hell did that happen? Well, once upon a time on Earth 1610, Tony Stark's older brother created a clone of the Hulk who was much less interested in eating people and having fatal sexual intercourse with others. Fatal for them, not for him. He's kind of a horn dog and also super sexual assaulty. Yeah, he's a bad dude. That's the Ultimate Universe. Now this Hulk though is often referred to as Nerd Hulk, and while he is capable of maintaining his intellect, he's much weaker than the original 1610 Hulk thanks to him having control over his emotions, making him much less brutal and violent in combat, which actually Captain America of this universe is like, that makes him crappier. He's less good. He was eventually rejected from the Ultimates and found himself visiting New York City where he would be attacked by vampires, becoming one of them. Gotta love comics. He tried to bite and convert the Avengers, yet failed, and ended up taking over the group when he decided to undermine and kill their current leader. He ended up dying when exposed to sunlight, with Captain America letting him burn alive for a bit before ultimately decapitating him. Speaking of death, that brings us to our next number. In at number 9, he's undead. On Earth 9602, that is. So on that Earth, the Hulk is an undead creature. This is Sculpt. Hulk. He is the amalgamation of the Hulk and Solomon Grundy, and yes, he is undead. After an experiment with radiation went horribly wrong for Bruce Banner, he fused with the elemental entity of Solomon Grundy from the DC universe. This is the amalgam universe that we were talking about after all. This gave him the combined strength of the Hulk and all of the Hulk's abilities, along with Grundy's, whose exact nature of powers are unknown. Grundy himself is a reanimated corpse, mystically connected to the swamp where he died, and he was reborn. Every time he dies, that swamp gives him a new life, which must come in handy, but you're also an undead, like, reanimated living corpse, so I don't know if it's a good trade-off. Pretty good not being a corpse, although I've never been a corpse, so I wouldn't know if it's a bad thing. Just saying.
Number 8. Superpower Manipulation. This is one that people can't seem to wrap their heads around because, well, it's just too overpowered, and why Hope Summers isn't utilized in the comics as often as someone of her power level could be, or maybe should be depending on your opinion. Superpower Manipulation is a weird one because it basically isn't a power that has any inherent weaknesses attached to it. You can do whatever you need to with that power. The possibilities are pretty much endless. In giving Hope this power, they created something virtually undefeatable. But when we read comics, the struggle is what we usually most enjoy exploring and reading about. So from a writer and storyteller context, this makes Hope's power a hard one to feature and use in comics, which is why you might notice stories that involve her don't usually focus on her insane power set.
And at 7, he's a cannibal. Okay, sure, cannibalism is not a power. If anything, it's just a sickly scare tactic this Hulk uses in battle, but it is still a facet of the Ultimate Universe character that confuses some, so we've added it to our list. You can call it a power if you want. It's kinda weird if you do. Now for starters, the first time the Ultimate version of Bruce Banner transformed into the Hulk, it was a one-time thing. When he's later asked to work towards creating a new super soldier formula, he gets frustrated and ends up transforming himself when he injects himself with it to test. This transformation becomes permanent this time, and he would later confess that the honest-to-God truth of the matter was that he just missed being big. But this form has clearly impacted his psyche because he is a major He's such a threat that he needs to be locked up and is used as a weapon of last resort, with Cap getting the permission to traumatize Banner in order to get him to attack and act out against their enemies. He ends up eating a Chitauri agent, and in the Ultimate Wolverine vs. the Hulk issue 2, Hulk ends up devouring a bunch of co-workers on a farm after they make fun of Bruce Banner's decision to be vegan, along with questioning his sexuality, something that the Hulk seems to be very sensitive about in this universe. It triggers him into violence on multiple occasions. He even yells out "Hulk straight" at one point, so maybe he's a little gay. Moving on to number 6, Lizard Powers. On Earth 19919, we got to witness what the amalgamation of the Hulk and Spider-Man foe Lizard would look like. Known more commonly as Lizard Hulk, apt. This version of Bruce Banner has been infected with the spider virus in Spider Island issue 1, when the Spider Queen took over Manhattan. Lots of spiders. In order to rewrite the spider's DNA and remove the Spider Queen's control, Hulk and other heroes went under procedures to alter themselves. Now for Hulk, this was being injected by the Lizard's serum, which transformed him into the lizard-esque version of himself. It also gave him the abilities that Curtis Connors of Earth 616 has, including wall crawling, a faster regenerative healing factor, a tail that he can detach and then regrow, fangs and claws, and lastly, the ability to telepathically communicate and control forms of reptilian life within a 2-mile distance. Moving on to number 5, Venom Hulk. Once upon a time, the Venom symbiote bonded with the Hulk, upgrading Bruce Banner from regular Hulk to one with all of Venom's abilities. That's scary, guys. While we don't get to see the full range of what this terrifying character can do, it still manages to go on a rampage and be a massive threat to multiple heroes. For context, this occurred in a story titled "What If the Alien Costume Had Possessed Spider-Man" in What If Volume 2, Issue 4. The hypothetical scenario in this one features Peter Parker not going to the Fantastic Four in time to have the symbiote removed from him, leading it to it hopping around possessing a bunch of Marvel heroes. It was a short-lived bond though. Venom would sense Thor's power after he had bonded with Hulk, and then jump ship for the Asgardian instead. That's like kind of a diss. It's like I'd rather be in Thor.
In at number 4, Magnetism. When looking at this Omega level mutant power, the first person who always comes to mind is of course Magneto. Although Magneto does so much more than just bending forks. Magneto has control over electromagnetism. This is one of the 4 fundamental forces of the universe. Magnetism though is one aspect of the combined electromagnetic force. It's the physical phenomena of objects either repelling or attracting. Human magnetism on the other hand, which is the main category to explain Magneto, is still an alleged ability in the real world. Most people who claim to be a human magnet also believe that their body can attract other materials. This claim, however, disrupts the explanation that they have a magnetism power and implies that there is a different kind of physical effect that's occurring.
Moving on to number 3, different emotions, different Hulks. Here's a power that actually hails from the 616 universe. Did you know that different Hulks can manifest inside of Bruce Banner's psyche, and that based on their core emotion that they derive from, can have different power levels and different influence over Banner and the Hulk? Case in point, Kul. I don't know, it's Hulk spelled backwards. K-L-U-H. Let's go with Kul on this one. Kul is the manifestation of Bruce Banner's sadness rather than rage. These manifestations are rooted in different emotions, and they're actually aspects of Hulk's personality and not Banner's, giving him less control over them. All things considered, that is pretty rotten luck. Kul has more power than the regular Hulk, and when Hulk is really sad, this guy comes out to play. He's significantly stronger, larger, and has a set of claws that would leave anyone shivering in their boots. In addition to that, we've also seen other iterations of Hulk's personality in the past, including Guilt Hulk and Devil Hulk, although Kul managed to be its own independent entity, existing outside of Banner and Hulk's mind. Correct me in those comments, friends, please. And at number 2, Unipower. Once upon a time, the Hulk became Captain Universe. Now, Captain Universe is a physical manifestation of something called the Unipower, which possesses an individual when there is a crisis, filling them with the power they need in order to put an end to said crisis, making that individual one of the strongest beings in the entire universe. Now, the power is absolutely immense. Multiple different characters in the Marvel Universe have been endowed with the Unipower in the past, including our pal Bruce Banner in the comic Captain Universe: The Incredible Hulk. Captain Universe uses the Hulk to try to restore its memory and find a scientist named Gilbert Wiles. Hulk wields this power temporarily, making him capable of things like energy manipulation, matter manipulation, energy projection, you name it. He's borderline omnipotent in this form. Speaking of being omnipotent, in at number 1, the power cosmic. Yeah, the Hulk had that once. The Hulk of Earth 2149 has been endowed with the power cosmic. Impressive, right? But not because he's some herald of Galactus's. No, he's actually a zombie, and came about getting that power upgrade by a kind of taboo means. Earth 2149 is the Marvel zombie universe. In it, everyone gets infected with a zombie virus and ends up eating one another, having an insatiable hunger. Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, is one of the worst of the worst. He, alongside other prominent zombified Marvel characters, end up devouring Galactus and Silver Surfer, and by eating them, they inherit the power cosmic. While one could argue that Galactus surely could take on a bunch of zombies, suspend your disbelief a little bit here. The Hulk becomes one of the zombie Galacti who ends up going around the galaxy in search of more food, pretty much obliterating all life in the process. All because he had a big old gigantic snack in the form of Galactus. Yikes.
Number 10, the Teen Tyrants. We're gonna start off with a variant of the team from another Earth. They're inspired by the Crime Syndicate, who are the evil version of the Justice League. So their team consists of Red Robin, Tempest, Arsenal, Red Raven, and Blackfire. What makes this slightly perplexing, especially to someone just jumping in, is except for one of these are all names that have been used either by the hero in question or someone in their universe. For example, Red Robin is often the alias of Tim Drake, but this Red Robin is an alternate evil Dick Grayson. Tempest is the name eventually taken on by Aqualad, just like Arsenal is for Roy Harper, and Blackfire in the main verse is Starfire's sister. They were clearer with their naming in the Crime Syndicate, where it was Ultraman, Superwoman, Owlman, etc. However, admittedly, a lot of the potential confusion is cleared up by the visuals, and the fact that the Titan team in question here is the one from the animated series, and not from the comics, so that helps. Number 9, Jesse Quick. Now for those of you who are watching the CW Flash show, you'll know of the existence of Jesse Quick, but what about her history with the Titans? Jessie Chambers first debuted in the Justice Society of America Volume 2 Number 1 back in 1992. She's the daughter of two Golden Age heroes, Johnny Quick and Liberty Bell. Through some waffling about where to put her, she ended up on the 90s run of the Teen Titans, which was simply entitled Titans. At this point, she was a member of the team but also managed her father's company, Quick Start. Part of why she was recruited to the Titans was that they felt their personal squabbles had taken the team down before, and they wanted buffers. A question people often have about Jessie and her speed is how fast is she in relation to Wally, cause it would vary. Also, she was involved with her mom's boyfriend and that led to his death. It was a whole thing. She accessed her speed powers using what she called a mantra. She could visualize the speed formula, so she had to do this in order to access the speed force, which she was linked to. Because of her mom, she also has super strength, so a good power combo. Number 8, we have to take a look at a movie now. We've got Captain America, the really cheesy one from 1990. The movie that gave us a Steve Rogers who steals vans by pretending to be carsick. In this film, the Red Skull is really against the president's pro-environmental campaign and decides that really there's only one thing to do, and that's kidnap and brainwash him. This is instead of assassinating him, which was an option, but the kidnap brainwash plan is just so much more fun. The Red Skull needs a challenge. There's also nukes involved, but this brainwashing plot was the crux of it. This plan is weak, and if the Red Skull were real, I'm sure he'd sue for slander, cause he'd never come up with such a played out plan. At least not in the 90s. Maybe in the days of the Great Milk Price hike though. It was a joke, I know they're from different companies. Lower your pitchforks. Number 7. Wonder Girl, Cassandra Sandsmark, the second Wonder Girl even though she's the third to be called that name. She first debuted in Wonder Woman Volume 2 number 105 back in 1996. Unlike Donna Troy before her, she has a definitive and clear origin. She was Wonder Woman's sidekick and would go on to be a teen titan, have a thing with Superboy, at the time Con-El or Connor Kent, and then end up with Robin, Tim Drake, his best friend when they thought he was dead. So she gets her powers from mystic artifacts, such as the Gauntlet of Artemis, the Sandals of Hermes, which give her strength and flight. Also, fun fact, Zeus blessed Cassandra's mother to be able to take away her powers temporarily with a touch. Zeus believes in a good time out. This isn't random, she's Zeus's daughter. He's still taking up with the Earth ladies all these millennia later. Cassandra also has a lasso, but it's not a lasso of truth. She can also have her powers impacted by other members of the Greek pantheon, like Ares, who once took her powers because he felt she was being too frivolous. You have to be into Wonder Woman to get all the nuances of Cassandra, and since Rebirth she really hasn't been as prominent. She is now on the Titans of Tomorrow, because there were multiple Titans books running simultaneously. So now she's not in the present timeline. But it's fine, I mean Connor only kinda sorta exists right now anyway, there's so much confusion with who is who and where they are. Number 6. Wally West 2. So Wally West 1, I guess, is the second Flash in the Mainverse timeline, but the third if you include all continuity. He took over the mantle of the Flash after Barry Allen died in Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985. So then Wally went from being Kid Flash to Adult Flash. He was the Flash all the way up until the New 52, which was used as an opportunity to retcon him out of existence, cause DC head Dan Didio doesn't like him. And yet, there was still a Wally West. Meet Wallace West. He debuted in the Flash Annual number 3 back in 2014. He is introduced at first as the biracial, even though they rarely draw him that way at first, son of Iris's brother. Wally would end up joining the New 52 version of the Titans as Kid Flash, but fans never really took to him as they were salty and bitter about how Wally 1 was retconned. So they brought Wally 1 back in Rebirth. They're gonna call the second one Wally 2, I'm calling the first one Wally 1. Wally was brought back in Rebirth, it was a big event. Very moving. But now, what about Wally 2? It's not his fault he was poorly introduced and handled. Also, if he was retconned out of existence, there would be a thing on a whole other level. So he has been kept around as well, and in Rebirth has a new origin. He is now the son of Iris's other brother, Daniel West, who is the Reverse Flash, which is a cooler origin. Wally 2 is cool, he just needed to be introduced in a way that wasn't full on trying to replace the first Wally. Why did anyone think people would go with that? Who greenlit this? Number 5. Ravager. Okay, so there have been 5 DC characters named Ravager, but we're talking about Rose Wilson, Deathstroke's daughter. She first appeared in Deathstroke number 15 back in 1992. Ravager, pre-rebooted origins, had a complicated relationship with her father to the point where she both idolized and hated him, and was modified with the same serum that enhanced him. However, the serum rendered her unstable, and she was prone to fits of psychotic rage. She even gouged her own eye out to be more like her father. She ends up on the Titans after befriending Nightwing, who Deathstroke had asked to train Rose after she had lost to Batgirl Cassandra Cain. This was after Dick's rape, so he was in a bad place and open to going to the dark side for a little bit. Rose would mellow out considerably post-crisis. She would get her eye back and would sometimes babysit Leanne for Roy Harper, back when Roy Harper's daughter was still alive and existed. She's also been a member of Terror Titans, and since Rebirth she is around again, but not as prominent. And Nightwing trained her, but not because Slade asked him to, but because he wanted to.
Moving on to number 4, Super Teen. On one of our previous lists we mentioned Pureheart, the superhero version of Archie's comics namesake, Archie Andrews. He is a superhero who is pure of heart, if his name didn't give that away. And what exactly he is capable of is questionable at best. As long as he remains pure of heart, he has superpowers. You guys should probably go watch part 3 of this list if you're curious. Now for those of you who already have, at this number we have one of his companions, the superhero version of Betty Cooper, who comes to be when Betty twists her magical ponytail. Actually, her powers are supposed to be similar to Pureheart's, which, yes, just makes her more confusing. She has been described as a hero who can, I quote, do just about anything with her snappy looking costume and jet belt. So we know she can fly, we know she has super strength, we know that she is super durable, and we know her powers come to be when she witnesses someone's life in danger. For example, Archie about to get hit by a truck, Archie about to fall off a ledge, Archie about to hurt himself in pretty much any way possible, because apparently he is super klutzy. Or at least he is when Super Teen's around. But aside from that, she just tends to be a bit vague in her portrayals, hence her inclusion on this list. And just baffling conceptually in general. It's like Archie Comics is like, let's make our characters into superheroes. That's a great idea, and it just didn't really work out.
Number 3. Power Boy. Once again a hero that has shared their name with multiple others. We're talking about the third Power Boy. And yes, there is a Power Boy, and yes, he has a boob window. The third Power Boy debuted in Teen Titans Volume 3, number 38 back in 2006, and was on the team during the 1-year gap in Infinite Crisis. He had vague Supermanish powers. So Power Boy was supposed to be a male parody of female superhero cliches, down to his costume that had the boob window and had a lot of chest hair in it. I don't know, for me it never fully crystallized. I mean, a lot of heroes have ridiculous costumes, and as a fan of the boob window, that never really connected with me. He dated Supergirl for a bit and then got creepy and possessive, and she had to assault him to get him to leave her alone. Again, parody? If so, it's just poorly executed. Can somebody else have this costume? I'm kinda into it. Number 2. Kid Devil, aka Red Devil. Meet Eddie Bloomberg. He first appeared in Fury of Firestorm number 24 back in 1984. Since Infinite Crisis, he was trying to join the Teen Titans and would eventually get in after failing for psychological problems. So Kid Devil, he used to get his powers from his devil costume, and some of the things were fun, like bursting bubbles, night vision, etc. But then Infinite Crisis happened and he was retconned. Now he had a demonic appearance and abilities to match. These given to him by the demon lord Neuron. He can breathe fire, has super strength and stamina, can heal almost any wound, his blood is now gasoline, his very breath can burn, he can create portals of fire and travel through them. He's not around right now. He died sacrificing himself to save the Titans. See, he was a good addition to the team after all, as cannon fodder. Too soon? Kid Devil is a bit of a blink and you'll miss him character for a lot of people. He's not the Blue Devil, that's a different character. And number 1. Donna Troy. She made her first appearance in The Brave and the Bold number 60 in 1965, but the character of Wonder Girl had been around since 1961. This character had been created as a direct result of Frederick Wertham's novel Seduction of the Innocent, which posited all kinds of at the time salacious things about these heroes, and the Comics Code Authority wanted to combat this, especially because they were saying that children shouldn't read comics at all, and that was their market. Aside from Batman and Robin being coded as a homosexual couple, Wertham was afraid that Wonder Woman was a lesbian. He was really concerned about this, because she was a strong independent woman who didn't need no man. So the solution to this was to give Wonder Woman a family, including a Wonder Girl, because lesbians don't have families, I guess. And Wonder Girl was her little sister, but it was really just a younger version of herself who she partnered up with. However, this led to confusion, as when the Teen Titans started, she was mistaken for a regular character and not another version of Wonder Woman. They thought she was a sidekick. So she became an independent character by accident, and because of this her origin would forever be a convoluted mess, because at the start she didn't have one. There was even an entire plot years later surrounding this called Who is Donna Troy? On her origin, Marv Wolfman had this to say: I wrote the original Donna Troy origin story back in the first Titans run. She had never had one and was in fact not a real character. She was a computer simulation of Wonder Woman as a girl. That story also named her Donna Troy and set up everything that followed. Unfortunately, after Crisis on Infinite Earths and the Wonder Woman revamp, we had to go back and redo it again, as a brand new Wonder Woman being born on Earth could not have rescued the girl from the burning building. I wish we had been able to keep it, as I think it's gone insane now. I just wanted a simple origin story. I came up with the original, and then George Perez and I simply elaborated on what had been done, giving her real knowledge of who she was. I would love to say that everything after Who is Donna Troy should be forgotten, but that's not the way continuity works, sadly. I feel like that belongs in a t-shirt. That's not the way continuity works, just a sad crying face. She also had multiple power sets and different origins for said power sets. First, she was given powers by the Amazon's Purple Ray. Post-Crisis, she had powers that were identical to Diana's, but they were later enhanced, and she could command darkness and cold. In Rebirth, when Dick became Rick, Donna took over leading the Titans. That's the Cliff Notes version. Donna could have a whole video all her own. At one point, she was a magical duplicate made up of the memories of her from Wally West. That's Wally West 1.
Number 10. Null. While Null is more of the creator or father of all symbiotes, he's also kind of like the original symbiote in a way. As such, he has control over all symbiotes, sort of like his children, and he can manipulate them to do whatever he wants, which, sure, Null is all-powerful, but also still a pretty weird bit of history that we discovered as we learned more and more about the bizarre and gloriously strange story of Clintar. His abilities include allowing him to turn all of his symbiotes, all of Clintar, into a space dragon. Yep. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, just acknowledging how amazingly spacey and strange he is. He also managed to use his symbiotes to merge with the Silver Surfer for a brief moment, likely plotting to use the Silver Surfer as his very own symbiote herald. Oh man, Null definitely needs some symbiote heralds. That is a story I would read the heck out of. Number 9, Agony. Agony is the forced offspring of Venom, who was also modified by the Life Foundation. While Venom has been known to have somewhat acidic powers, Agony took this ability one bizarre step further, possessing the ability to spit acid harmful enough to actually melt human flesh. But it doesn't stop there. Agony also possesses the weird and unique ability to absorb substances and then reuse them itself, like Spider-Man's webbing.
In at number 8, Willful Transformation. The Hulk of Earth 928 has the ability to transform at will, which comes in handy. This Hulk, known as Hulk 2099, looks way more like a dinosaur than the traditional Hulk. With razor-sharp claws and fangs capable of tearing through steel, he's everything that the 616 Hulk is, but more vicious and more controlled. He was transformed by a gamma device used on him by the Knights of Banner cult, a group who worshipped the 20th century Hulk. This weapon of theirs was developed after they began experiments with gamma radiation in hopes of creating a new Hulk. And they got their wish when John Eisenhart, a movie studio exec, approached them in hopes of securing the rights to their story. When they said no, he reported their gamma experiments to authorities, who then slaughtered the cult, but then during the crossfire, he was hit by that gamma weapon and became the Hulk.
Number 7, Lasher. What's weird about this one is Lasher actually exhibits a less refined version of a power that the Venom symbiote attempted to exert earlier on. Okay, so I'm not going to lie, this one is just as interesting as it is strange in terms of symbiote history, which is kind of why I selfishly wanted to share it with you guys on this list. But it is additionally and also fairly outlandish and odd power, so it also belongs here as well. Lasher is a forced offspring of Venom, whose creation was manipulated by the government and the Life Foundation. Lasher's weird power as a result of that is that it can bond with two hosts, though one host needs to be less sentient or non-sentient in order for it to work. This is interesting because it is originally a power that Venom attempted to flex when it sought to bond with both Peter Parker and Eddie Brock at the same time. A symbiote threesome of sorts, you might say. However, it didn't work and caused Venom to pass out from exhaustion just for trying it. The other weird thing about this enhanced ability for Lasher is out of all of the things the government could work to improve, this seems like kind of a weird one to pick. All it grants the symbiote is additional control over a war dog ultimately, which is cool, but it doesn't seem like a huge advantage in comparison to, say, trying to cure one of its natural weaknesses, which would be better. Like, now it's not weak to fire or something like that. Number 6, Scorn. Scorn is the offspring of Carnage and Tannis Knives' prosthetic arm, because apparently that's a thing that can happen. As such, it has unique technological abilities, being part tech, part symbiote. It can fuse and interact with tech and seems to have a level of immunity when it comes to the usual sonic weaknesses that most symbiotes suffer from. What a weird symbiote, though. A weird origin. Number 5, Toxin. As its name implies, Toxin has the unique power of toxic fangs. While Venom itself seems to sometimes be able to produce acid, these toxic fangs and the toxic bite that it comes with seem to be a power that doesn't really come much from anywhere specific that makes sense. Symbiotes obviously possess their own power set due to their unique physiology, but when we were originally introduced to symbiotes, it was implied that unique abilities were actually cloned from those that they had bonded with previously, making Toxin's bite kind of an odd one, because where does it come from? But then again, many of the other symbiotes have also appeared to have unique abilities, so maybe this is just a thing and we just learned about it later, and so symbiotes can be born with, or I guess develop, unique abilities just all on their own? And you might be thinking, like, maybe it does come from one of Toxin's parents or Toxin's parent symbiote, but his parent symbiote was Carnage, so I don't know. What is that?
Number 4, Jericho. Now Jericho is set to appear in the, at the time of this recording, upcoming season 2 of Titans. Jericho is another of Deathstroke's children. He first appeared in Tales of the Teen Titans number 43 back in 1984. He was created so the team wouldn't consist entirely of characters with connections to pre-existing heroes. He is Slade's youngest son. He was rendered mute when Slade's mercenary life caught up with him and they came to try and kill him and his family. He saved his son, but not before his vocal cords were cut. So Jericho could possess someone by making eye contact contact. His body turns insubstantial and then he enters the host. He can then tap into all that person's abilities. However, the victim can still speak. He can't take over that part unless they're asleep. Jericho was a pacifist and genuinely good person until he got corrupted. Now, Jericho isn't hard to understand, but he was largely forgotten for a time, which was a shame. His storylines were really good. Yay for him being acknowledged again.
Number 3, Sleeper. Another symbiote that possesses unusual chemical-related powers is Sleeper. Sleeper is another offspring of Venom. It was left in the care of Alchemax by its parent, Venom, and their partner, Eddie Brock, who helped in a way to give birth to Sleeper, I guess you could say, making Eddie Brock, I guess, kinda like a parent to Sleeper too, although not genetically speaking per se. Even Alchemax was surprised when Sleeper seemed to develop all its own, a power of chemokinesis. It can create and secrete chemicals for a variety of purposes. It can use this ability to propel itself through space, manipulate the emotions of others, cloak its scent, control minds, and even to neutralize and attack enemies. Number 2, Anti-Venom. This is a pretty strange symbiote, even in just how it came to be. Anti-Venom is a symbiote that was created when Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, used his powers to cure Eddie Brock's cancer. But for some reason, his power bonded with the remnants of Venom that still lingered within Brock and created a new symbiote known as Anti-Venom. Being that this symbiote was created in such an odd way, some unique abilities made sense. It had been created after bonding with Eddie's white blood cells, so of course it had immense healing and cleansing powers. But it also for some reason had immunity to the usual weaknesses of a symbiote. It was immune to fire and sonic attacks for some reason, and this was never really fully explained, and just chalked up to it being an extremely different kind of symbiote. So there's still a lot that I feel like we didn't really figure out about Anti-Venom before it went poof, bye. Number 1, Venom. Venom has displayed countless abilities over the years and has changed as time has changed along with it. It has been revealed to be able to merge with inorganic material, giving us briefly a Venommobile for a bit when it was also bonded with a host at the same time. The Venom symbiote actually can seemingly bond to anything, including a dinosaur in the Old Man Logan universe. It's learned how to grow wings, has immunity to Ghost Rider's penance stare for some reason, maybe because it was once bonded with Ghost Rider, has access to a pocket dimension, can camouflage itself, and can travel through telephone lines and also travel through the internet. But one of the strangest powers was revealed during the time it spent with Flash Thompson as Agent Venom in outer space during the Space Knight series. At that point, it was revealed that after being cleansed, well, partially cleansed really, as it would later turn out, it could hear the voice of the universe, which gave it kind of like a galactic SOS radar, allowing Venom to sense when planets were in danger. Yeah, entire planets. Probably one of the most out there powers that we have seen it display. Spacey powers are always so weird and out there. They're great.
And at 10, he can create more Hulks. No, we are not talking about procreation here, friends. Hulk's blood has the ability to not only heal others, but to turn them into Hulk monsters as well. Case in point, Bruce Banner's cousin Jennifer Walters. Jennifer became She-Hulk after Bruce gave her a blood transfusion, something that neither had anticipated. She had been shot by an enemy of her father's, who is the LA County Sheriff, and luckily, Bruce was in town and had the same blood type as her. His radioactive blood mixed with her anger over the situation would transform her into She-Hulk, but her powers were a more reduced version of Bruce's, and she could eventually control her transformations too. Now the only hang up with this ability of the Hulks is that in order for it to successfully work, the other individual needs to have DNA that is a close match to Bruce Banner's, meaning it's only really gonna work for relatives, but still cool nonetheless. Up next at 9, Power Source. The Hulk's body is always creating and radiating gamma energy, which makes him like a walking gamma battery, as noted in the Incredible Hulk issue 103 from Volume 1. Now on several occasions, the radiation within the Hulk's body has been used as an energy source. While that sounds really neat, it can also cause devastating effects, so maybe think twice about asking him to help you charge your phone. In World War Hulk, this occurred when Hulk got so angry that he nearly smashed the planet to smithereens, and in the process, because of how pissed off he was, his body began to emit radiation. Conrad Zaxxon once tried to use the Hulk as a battery for weapons that he wanted to take over the Earth with. Now the Hulk can force feed large amounts of this gamma radiation to overload machines, or to drain enemies of their own gamma radiation, like he did to the second Red Hulk. The exact extent of how much radiation the Hulk can control at any given time has yet to be determined.
In at number 8, energy manipulation. This is the ability to manipulate energy from one form into another. Some magicians have used this phenomenon of energy manipulation to make blindfolded people believe the magician is touching a portion of their body, and by directing them to focus their attention on the body, the end result has been astounding.
If you felt a touch, please raise your right hand.
We do understand energy manipulation to some extent in regards to electricity. We know that this energy can be distributed and transformed into everything around us. However, in terms of phenomenons like the way that Omega level mutants manipulate energy, it's something that cannot be observed, tested, or measured in any way, meaning it is virtually impossible for science to explain how it would work.
And at 7, regeneration. Hulk has the ability to grow new tissue at an exceptionally fast rate, and to regenerate older tissue. He has had one of the fastest regenerative healing factors in the entire Marvel universe, having demonstrated that if he concentrates hard enough, he can grow back parts of his body, like layers and layers of skin in a matter of seconds. Now this can occasionally cause some problems for him. When he fought against Speed Freak, the villain hit him with metal barbs, and the Hulk's skin grew over the barbs, causing it to tear again after the regrowth. It's gotta hurt. Then, in Hulk the End, he was able to regenerate parts of his body that radioactive cockroaches consumed, which also doesn't sound fun. Plus, the angrier he gets, the faster he can regenerate, so kind of a nifty ability to have. And at number 6, resurrection. In Civil War II, the Inhuman Ulysses has a vision of the Hulk killing all of the Avengers. When Bruce Banner, the Hulk's former alter ego, is approached about the situation, he's confronted by members of the Avengers, and Hawkeye, in the process, kills Banner. But shortly after Civil War II ended, the Hulk had resurrected Banner, as seen in Avengers No Surrender. The comic depicts a whole sequence of all of the times Banner and the Hulk have faced death, intercut with the image of a doorway opening, implying that's how Banner's mind returns after the Hulk's body regenerates once he's been killed off. Does that mean, like, even of old age, he'll never really truly die? Or does his mind have to still be, you know, functional and wanting to live? It's a curious question. Moving on to 5, adaptability. The Hulk is one of the most adaptable heroes in comic books. Now because of the speed in which he regenerates tissue, he's able to survive some of the harsher climates, like pressure underwater or the vacuum of outer space. But here is the fun part. He has a gland in his body that creates oxygen to fill his lungs, so when he's underwater or when he's in space, he can function without fear of losing air. His body is also built to sustain extreme amounts of pressure, hence why he's able to walk along the bottom of the ocean, which is a thing he did once. Said neat a lot in this video.
Number 4. Lex makes a robotic Lois Lane. So Lex is obsessed with Clark on many levels, some that he probably doesn't want to admit to himself, and he's always scheming something. Remember when Connor Kent, aka Con-El, was Lex and Clark's son before they retconned that? Well, I will always remember. The New 52? What's that? So in Action Comics number 890, we learned that Lex's assistant had made a Lois Lane robot, and while Lex was like, okay, thanks, I'll keep it. And he did, and he slept with her. It's just weird. This is just bizarre villainous behavior. It happened while plotting, really, but you need to know. I mean, he's creating clones of him and Clark's DNA. He's sleeping with a Lois Lane bot. There are things that need to be discussed here that probably never will be. All I'm gonna say is, Klex.
In at 3, honing in on New Mexico. While that might sound like a very strange ability, it's one that makes perfect sense for the Hulk. So, the Hulk is capable of honing in on the place of his superpower origin. This is something we learned about thanks to the Hulk of Future Imperfect, Maestro, a future timeline version of the big green monster who had survived a nuclear war and became a tyrant overlord of sorts, dominating over the planet, collecting trophies of other dead superheroes and villains. He was also completely insane by this point thanks to the extreme amounts of radiation he was absorbing. Anywho, when the Hulk defeats Maestro, he does it by leading him back in time so that he's destroyed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk. Therefore, homing in on this spot in New Mexico is because of Maestro's spirit calling out to him. This also ties into 2 other supernatural abilities, so let's move on to those. In at 2, he can see ghosts. So that whole ability to home in on his origin spot in New Mexico, how Maestro's spirit had called out to him since it's the place where he died, well, this is kind of tied to this too, and his ability to see ghosts. Now this was actually a latent ability of the Hulk's, which first appeared after he accidentally killed his father, whose ghost then haunted him for a while. There's been a bit of a debate as to how exactly the Hulk can see ghosts, hence the confusion surrounding this power. But one answer comes in the form of our next number, and our final number, in at 1, astral sight. The Hulk can see individuals on the astral plane. Now this was first explored in the Defenders when the Hulk interacted with Doctor Strange, who was astral projecting at the time. Others could not perceive Strange's astral form, only Hulk could. While some have linked this ability to Maestro, a more plausible theory has arisen in the form of this ability of the Hulk's being a convenient plot point, which, I mean, Yeah. Now, in order to help bring the members of that iteration of Defenders together in a way that made sense, certain editorial choices were made, including having the Hulk be able to see Doctor Strange. But in the story world though, Doctor Strange would speculate that it was a power derivative of some sort of primitive or animalistic aspect of the Hulk's mind, that he could sense a fundamental wrongness in the environment around him, although there wasn't much further elaboration on it. Now, others chalk this up to the fact that he has a heightened sense of perception, and how that allows him to hunt and fight off characters the likes of the Wendigo. Plausible theories. I kinda like the last one. In at number 10, Danielle Moonstar. Danielle Moonstar is a confusing character, period. She's an individual who has been through multiple iterations of aliases, to the point where it's almost comical. Danielle Danny Moonstar first appeared in the New Mutants in 1982, and is a Cheyenne superhero who is generally associated with the X-Men. She was initially codenamed Psyche and later became Mirage. And her abilities history is a long one. Let's start with her mutant powers. She was a former empath who lost her abilities to communicate with animals and create three-dimensional images of visual concept within her mind and the minds of others. Like I said, she lost that. Generally, she could manifest people's fears or desires as realistic illusions. She lost those powers on M-Day and then regained them after being infected with the transmute virus, but then was also cured of it by Dark Beast. See what I mean? It's already confusing. She briefly could make telepathic images manifest as psionic energy, allowing them to become tangible entities of solid psionic force, but that was limited. She would carry around a dream spear with her to destroy them when she was done with them. Unfortunately though, these powers would give her blinding headaches. Then, she became a Valkyrie, and was endowed with the Valkyrie power to perceive death. She would lose those powers though when Asgard fell, but then made a deal with Hela to get them back. And, in the past, she was capable of manipulating quantum energy. Moving on to number 9, Black Hood. When you hear the name Black Hood, a couple of different things may pop into your mind. For starters, it's a name that likely elicits a pulp character. Mysterious and criminal perhaps in nature, a vigilante maybe. Now for those of you immersed in pop culture sensations, you might think of the CW TV series Riverdale and its mildly absurd Black Hood serial killer storyline. If you don't watch Riverdale, yes, that's a thing. Well, the Black Hood comic character actually has relations to that latter association, since he was a creation of Archie Comics. First appearing in Top Notch Comics issue 9 in 1940, he became rather popular, getting his own title called Black Hood Comics in 1943, which was a pulp magazine that ran for 11 issues before it was retitled and shifted its focus to being an all-humor title. During his time under Archie Comics, he was merely a great fighter and detective, but after the character was revived by DC's Impact Comics imprint in 1991, he gained a different set of powers, magically increased physical abilities and awareness. So what does that even mean? Well, we'll get to that in a sec, because here's where it gets even more befuddling. Impact had 3 Black Hoods. The first was a bitter vigilante who was killed off in their first issue of Black Hood. The second was a high school student who took over the hood but then abandoned it. And then the third was a former mobster who killed the first Black Hood. Whenever somebody wore the hood, they would get heightened awareness and increased strength, speed, and agility. The real kicker though? The hood was believed to be cursed, with each individual who wore it eventually succumbing to death, and the hood finding its way into the hands of a new individual who had the potential to take up the helm.
Number 8, Osiris. There have been 3 Osirises, and for our purposes we need the third, Amon Tomaz. He was briefly a member between Infinite Crisis and 1 year later. Big DC reset events, cause nothing shakes up the roster of a team like a giant event. So he is the brother of the hero Isis, who during this period would marry Black Adam, who was on a heroic bend briefly, kinda sorta. Osiris joined the Titans cause he wanted friends. You know, save the world, go out for burgers, it's like a club really, but sometimes members die, and he was one of them. He was granted his powers by Black Adam, and so to become Osiris he must say his name, which must have a double effect on people. They must panic and think Black Adam is about to show up to defend his brother-in-law. One question people have about his powers is whether or not he has access to all of Adam's powers when he is not there, or is it just still a small portion of them, which is the usual Shazam fare, but coming from Egyptian gods. So Shu, Heru, Amon, Zehutu, Aten, and Mehen. If I mispronounced any of those, I'm sorry, but I'm sure some of you will yell at me anyway.
And at 7, Jazz. If you thought Thunderer was a character who had a silly power, get ready to wrap your mind around Jazz. No, not the music, but the character. Jazz, whose real name is John Xander, is a blue-skinned mutant who wanted to be a rapper, but was not good at it. He became a drug runner instead, selling toad juice, which was a drug made from the secretions of another mutant. Gross. After M-Day, he was one of the few who retained his powers, and later, while trying to buy drugs, he was killed by Johnny D via a miniature voodoo doll. Needless to say, dude has a bit of a mockable storyline. So why is he confusing? Because he is a low-level mutant who doesn't actually have an ability. His mutation is that his skin is blue. That's it. I mean, maybe he could rap you to death with his mediocrity, but technically that is not a superpower. That's just a depressing character trait. And at 6, Kylun. There are plenty of animal-themed superheroes out there in the world of comics. Generally, their powers derive from their animal persona, as if they were some sort of anthropomorphic creature who had the abilities of said creature. We're not talking furries here, friends. Don't you dare make that joke in the comments. For example, take a look at Beast. Even Wolverine has similarities to his alias's namesake. But then there is Kylun, who is slightly misleading. Sure, he looks like a cat creature of sorts, feline in nature, but that has no relation to his abilities. He's got claws and fangs which he can use in battle, but his true power is something unrelated. He can mimic sounds. Literally any sound that he hears, Kylun, aka Colin McKay, can replicate it thanks to his superpowered vocal cords. You weren't expecting that, were you? And at 5, Metamorpho. Metamorpho is a head scratcher. Also known as the Element Man, Metamorpho is a DC character who helped found the Outsiders, and first appeared in 1965 in The Brave and the Bold issue 57. He was a product of the popularity of Fantastic Powers, a successor to Doom Patrol and Metal Men, and his abilities consisted of elemental shapeshifting, super strength, and invulnerability. While those last two are pretty straightforward, it's the shapeshifting that we're concerned with. When you think elemental, you think fire, earth, water, air, right? Well, Metamorpho is more complex than that, which often causes confusion surrounding the character. He can transmute his body into a variety of elemental compounds that he can then form to his will. In other words, he is a much more science-based hero. Now initially he was restricted to elements that naturally occur within the human body, but over time that became less and less of a limitation, with writers allowing him to assume forms of gas, liquids, or solid states. He can alter the shapes and consistencies of these elements to form complex compounds, and can shape parts and portions of his body rather than being forced to change it in its entirety. He is capable of forming himself into complex structures the likes of tanks and a bicycle, or more ambiguous stuff like a cloud. And at number 4, demonic abilities. Want demon powers? Just shack up in hell for a while and bam, you'll become orange and capable of all sorts of terrible things. Or at least that's what Infernal Hulk has taught us. Hailing from Earth 11638, Infernal Hulk has a fascinating story. Upon first glance, he is just the Hulk merged with the demon, and while that's not wrong, there's more to it than that. Bruce Banner of Earth 11638 is the Sorcerer Supreme. He casts a spell in which his Hulk half is separated from him and banished to the depths of hell, but it backfires because the Hulk goes down into hell and becomes more demonic, corrupted by the demons he encounters, gaining some of their powers and also turning orange, as one does in hell. He finds his way back up to Earth and wreaks havoc, with Bruce ultimately having to remerge them and then banish himself to hell with the Hulk in order to keep humanity safe. And at 3, Extrano. Extrano is a character who didn't receive the best of treatment in his early years. A DC character, Extrano first appeared in Millennium issue 2 in 1988 and is a superhero magician, although many might remember him for what he's generally mocked for. A magical gay character who was attacked by an AIDS vampire called Hemogoblin that then made him HIV positive. You can't make this up. Needless to say, the portrayal was not a great one, especially for the queer community in a time when there was plenty of misconceptions about AIDS. He was a character who was selected by the Guardians of the Universe to take part in an experiment in human evolution, which made him into a powerful magician, whose sorcery abilities were never really fully elaborated upon. He would dress in loose, colorful garments, refer to himself as Auntie, and was pretty much coded as a homosexual character, who later would acquire a powerful skull crystal that made him more masculine, which was largely believed to be the result of negative comments from readers. His magic consisted of stage tricks, using ping pong balls to outwit his foes. He could levitate and fire blasts of energy from his hands, but not much of what he could do was explained in great detail. He was very much the token magician character. Now these days he's gotten a bit more of a makeover, although his abilities are still quite ambiguous. He appeared in DC Rebirth, working with Midnighter to locate Apollo's soul in hell. According to writer Steve Orlando, who himself is bisexual, I quote, "With a book like Midnighter and Apollo, which from cover to cover is a love letter to queer characters and our struggle to live, be visible and loved, it felt right to return one of the first and reintroduce him to a new generation." Maybe there's hope for Extrano after all. Up next at 2, Doorman. Doorman, aka Damar Davis, is a Marvel character who first appeared in West Coast Avengers Volume 2 issue 46 in 1989, and was a member of the Great Lakes Avengers. He responded to Mr. Immortal's ad for Heroes for the Great Lakes team, who, on paper, can generate portals, and can fly via skis, which yes is weird. He is intangible and can also bring souls to the afterlife. It's a confusing set of skills, right? But here's where it gets more perplexing. His portal ability has has a restriction. He can teleport people through walls, with his body serving as that portal, hence the name Doorman. Concerning the skis, he can summon them at will, although that doesn't make them any less confusing. If anything, his most useful talent is delivering souls to oblivion, but even then, he can only do it if that person is deceased, and he becomes only visible to that soul. It's like his creators didn't really think the portal ability was enough, so they decided to use the more mythical version of the Doorman or Gatekeeper and make him all about death, which for the record was a power of his added after the fact. And finally, in at number 1, Rainbow Girl. Ending off our list with an inherently sexist creation, we have Rainbow Girl. Rainbow Girl is an extraterrestrial character who first appeared in 1963 in DC's Adventure Comics issue 309. She is a metahuman who wields the power of the mysterious emotional spectrum, resulting in unpredictable mood swings. You can't make this up. It's like my mantra for this whole series. She would tap into colors that would result in different moods, red being anger, blue being hope, green being willpower. She once also exhibited the ability to create a pheromone field that surrounded her in a giant rainbow and gave her an irresistible personality. Ugh. But here's where it gets utterly fascinating. Even DC doesn't know what the hell she can do. According to Jeff Johns, during the Blackest Night event, he noted that Rainbow Girl doesn't fully understand her powers and uses them more for fun. Just kill me now.
In at number 10, telekinesis. This is a common power thrown around in the world of superheroes, but can you imagine if it actually existed? Being able to move objects with your mind has long been a topic of discussion by scientists, and there's even been odd anomalies of real life people explaining that they can actually do this. Evidence for how and why though is very sparse. Telekinesis defies the laws of physics, so for it to exist in our world on the level that it does for an Omega mutant would impact everything we believe about science. The idea of telekinesis being possible is something we can't even comprehend. Some in the psychic community have brought up that paranormal events of people seeing ghosts move things around could actually be the manifestations of our own spiritual energy being unconsciously released on it. However, even the concept that we have spirits is still a heavily divisive topic in the scientific community. In at number 9, telepathy. This concept of power that we often see mutants using is another human discussion about the possibility of it existing in our reality. What's really baffling about this mutant Omega level power is that it's never been a topic of discussion until the 20th century. We hear occasionally about stories of people being able to read minds, and many mentalists sell the idea that they have harnessed this ability, but in reality science denies its existence. It's defined as the transmission of thoughts over some distance without the use of any kind of technology. It is a kind of wireless communication between two human brains. Again though, scientists hark back to the laws of physics as to why its existence wouldn't make sense. The ability of telepathy isn't plausible because no section of the brain is positioned to act as a receptor for long distance communication without the use of technology.
Number 8. Magic Venom. This whole thing doesn't make a ton of sense to me, to be honest, though the abilities I guess can be explained away by being connected to magic? During the War of the Realms, Eddie Brock got to create his own version of Venom when he was gifted a Dreamstone by a dark elf witch. After he accepted it, the witch revealed that Eddie would now have to serve and fight for her ruler Malekith. Haha, gotcha. But of course, Eddie didn't want to, so instead, he chomped off one of her arms. That whole interaction was pretty weird, because, I mean, obviously, he's just gonna bite off one of your arms. What do you think was gonna happen, witch? And Eddie then used the Dreamstone, which can make your dreams come true, to create a new version of a magic Venom suit, which was also pretty strange. This version of Venom came with no voice of its own, but for some reason seemed to amplify Eddie's negative emotions. As such, Eddie decided to split up the magical symbiote, having the power to do so, transforming it into Asgardian armor for the civilians that he saved. Already a pretty weird ability. He could also control weather with the symbiote, because I guess dreams and magic?
In at number 7, weather manipulation. Weather manipulation is often referred to as weather modification, and the only way that we can understand it is by seeing a plane seed clouds to increase rain or snow. However, in terms of the way that, say, Storm can use her mind to manipulate the weather into whatever conditions that she wants, is very confusing and something we will never be able to understand as humans. In at number 6, power manifestation. This is the Omega power that Legion, the child of Professor X and Gabrielle, seems to have inherited. Not only did Legion take on his dad's telepathic gifts, but his dissociative identity disorder allowed for multiple personalities to each manifest its own powers. The very concept though of being able to use mind over matter to manifest power is very woo-woo subject matter in the science realm. In fact, true supernatural powers being manifested into a human has never been proven, and most obscure cases of moments of super strength, say, are attributed to a spike in adrenaline rather than a power that you've always had deep down and just haven't found a way to harness. In at number 5, matter manipulation. This is the ability to manipulate the particles that make up the matter and bonds between them. In 1990, IBM engineers manipulated atoms using a scanning tunneling microscope. They arranged atoms on a metal surface to spell IBM. This is interesting that we were able to manipulate matter, but again it was through the use of technology, so it's no wonder that this method could be explained. What could never be explained is a single individual being able to change the particle structure of an object using their mind. It is truly a science fiction mutant power.
Number 4, aviation. The power of aviation through non-telekinetic means, that is. Most mutants that can naturally fly usually have this power as a result of a physical mutation. Some are simply granted wings, like Angel or Pixie, who otherwise find themselves looking like a standard human exteriorly, but some find themselves with a full-on bird-like mutation, like Beak. Beak's aviation mutation, depending on the artist, can leave him looking pretty all-out freaky. He's either drawn like a full-on bird person, or sometimes like a hybrid bird-human. His aviation mutation barely even gives him flight abilities as well. He isn't great at flying, but he can manage to do it for very short distances if he really tries. So why does he look like a bird then? It's not really useful.
In at number 3, reality manipulation. So many of these powers are impossible for us to understand because of all of these scientific laws that we have in place to understand our reality. So reality manipulation would certainly throw everything we know out the window. When an Omega level mutant uses reality manipulation, it is a very powerful force. It gives them free reign to break the laws of physics and invent their own, which then is imposed on everyone living in said reality. We have altered our reality on a physical level if you consider the industrial age that saw humans building machines and cities to change the reality of everything from war to travel to how we live our everyday lives. On the level of breaking the laws of physics though, that becomes much more confusing to comprehend. In at number 2, temperature manipulation. Bobby Drake, or Iceman, is one of the OG X-Men that can manipulate his own body temperatures to create ice and even enclose his body within it. A state of being that, if possible in the real world, 1, could not be explained, and 2, would surely kill anyone who attempted it. We manipulate our home's temperatures with devices like the air conditioner or a furnace for heat, but to change our own temperature at a moment's notice would be much harder for science to explain. I mean, you can adjust your body's internal temperature, but if your core temperature dropped even by 2 degrees, your brain would just shut down from the hypothermia. Last but not least, in our number 1 spot, biokinesis. This is the ability to control and change one's genes by simply using the psychic powers of the mind. Omega level mutants such as Elixir have exhibited this in the past, showing off the ability to change the pigmentation of his skin. The difference between this Omega mutant and us though is that Elixir has complete control over his own organic structure and even those closest to him. He has really put this power to the test, displaying the potential for him to be able to bring people back from the dead even. In reality though, there is no explanation for people who claim they've changed their eye color by using this psychic ability. In most cases, these folks are clickbaiting the internet into believing it's possible if you just believe. Science, on the other hand, says otherwise.
Number 10. Nazis raise milk prices. This comes to us from 1942, so get ready, full steam propaganda ahead. All the heroes who were around at this time period were fighting Nazis, and Wonder Woman was no exception. But they still wanted there to be comic book plots, like this one from Sensation Comics number 7. In this tale, Diana notices that the price of milk is soaring, and she's on the case. She goes to speak to the head of International Milk Co., but he's dismissive. Long story short, they're secret Nazis, and they're raising the price of milk to make it inaccessible for American youth, so that they will have weak, brittle bones and not be able to fight. Playing the long game. They also try to drown her in milk, but she changes in the milk, escapes, and ultimately ensures the safety of good affordable milk prices. That's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking you could expect from the Golden Age villains. Kept you on your toes. Number 9. Ra's al Ghul pretends to be Talia to get Bruce Wayne's body. This is going to take us over to Batman Beyond, and is largely on here because I want to talk about this show and this fantastic episode. This plot comes to us from the episode Out of the Past, and deals with Bruce's sadness about aging and how he feels the best years of his life and his great loves are behind him. When lo and behold, Talia appears, offering him the chance to rejuvenate in the Lazarus Pit, thusly leaving Gotham to Terry and come and finally live their life together. Also, this is all pre-Damian, so she hasn't raped him in this continuity. That's how Damian was conceived. Fast facts. Bruce starts to take her up on it, but as you can imagine, it's too good to be true. And after sharing a kiss, and maybe more, it's revealed that Talia isn't Talia at all. It's Ra's, who has overwritten Talia, taking control of her body. This is all part of a long quest because he wants Bruce's body to rejuvenate it, transfer his consciousness into it, and pretend to be his long-lost heir, continuing his plans with Bruce Wayne's resources. Here's the thing, he didn't have to do this with Bruce. He could have picked any old rich Joe Schmo with no legitimate heirs and tempted them with youth. This was just creepy, and leads me to wonder about his true feelings for Bruce. Great episode, good series, watch it, that is all. And look, I didn't go off on my usual DCAU tangent, which this series is a part of.
Moving on to 8, The Thunderer. The Thunderer is a character who was published by Timely Comics in the Golden Age, the predecessor of Marvel. He's a dude whose superpower was high impact voice amplification. In other words, dude shouted real loud. So let's backtrack here for a sec. Thunderer first appeared in 1941 in Daring Mystery Comics issue 7, and was a fellow named Jerry Carstairs, a radio operator frustrated that the US wasn't dealing with crime or Nazi saboteurs, so he took the law into his own hands. After learning of a Nazi infiltration operation that was abusing the radio station he worked at, he adopted the Thunderer persona, a costume with a built-in microphone, and took them down. He is capable of deafening people or leveling buildings with his sonic scream. Sure, you could call him a predecessor to Black Bolt's perhaps, on a creative level, but let's be real here. How exactly he was able to create a built-in microphone to do that in the 40s and level buildings is beyond me. Needless to say, he fell into obscurity, with one of his only claims to fame now being that he appeared in an animated Spider-Man series in an episode called 6 Forgotten Warriors. At least his costume looked kinda cool though, you gotta give him that.
Number 7, last movie for now I promise. Then we're on to the full comic book zaniness, but we have to talk about Catwoman, the Halle Berry one. People often get caught up in the Halle Berry as Catwoman, or the terrible CG, or the costume trying so hard to be sexy it does a 180 and just becomes sad. But what is often skipped over is the plot. So this film involves an evil cosmetics company whose product will eventually destroy the faces of the women who use it, while also hardening them into stone. This is actually a classic storyline, we've been here before. However, when you make it the focal point of a 2004 movie, people start to poke holes in it. Lauren Hadare, played by Sharon Stone, is the wife of the CEO of the beauty company, and she just becomes obsessed. She kills patients. Halle Berry is not playing Selena Kyle in this movie. She kills her own husband and goes to great lengths to keep this a secret. They need to release this product and keep it going. However, here's the thing, this is an untenable plan. People are going to use this product and then the word will get out. Are you going to kill every single person who uses it? No. So essentially the fight is Catwoman trying to stop people from having to file a civil suit, a class action lawsuit actually. This movie is actually really fun if you accept it on its own terms. It's not good, but that doesn't mean you can't have a good time. Number 6, Scarecrow makes everyone illiterate. So the DCAU, that being the DC Animated Universe, had a series of tie-in Batman comics, 2 series actually, and this plot comes from those pages. And it takes the heroes a while to figure out that it's actually a Scarecrow plot, because in all fairness, it doesn't match his usual MO, at least not until you really think about it. So in this story, nobody can read anything anymore. They can't read signs, books, nothing, and society just instantly collapses. Train conductors can't run trains, people can't follow road signs, pandemonium. The thing with this plan is that it takes a very loose look at illiteracy, like people can't understand symbols of any kind or things that were color coded. Nothing. It's just a bit of a stretch. They can't even take money out of an ATM. All they're seeing is bizarre symbols. People are dying. They call it the illiteracy disease. This story was 2 parts. On the second cover it has Robin cowering in fear of road signs. The thing with this one is, well, it's just not accurately labeled. It makes for a fun story, but you really have to suspend your disbelief, which I'm 100% willing to do. Way to go outside the box, Scarecrow. That's good thinking. Number 5, Identity Crisis. Identity Crisis is one of those stories that was really well received when it was released, but people now look back on it with a bit of a jaded eye. Identity Crisis was released from June to December of 2004, and was written by famed thriller novelist Brad Meltzer, who wanted to create a thriller in the superhero format. The ramifications it had on characters and some of the mischaracterizations are still discussed to this day. But paradoxically, it was very solidly written. It just really needs to be taken on its own in a bubble, which thanks to 2 universe-wide shifts since, one can now do. So the villainess of this tale was Jean Loring, the former wife of the Atom, Ray Palmer, who set about terrorizing the loved ones of heroes so that she and the Atom would get back together because he'd be concerned about her safety. The only thing is, right out the gate, she accidentally killed the elongated man's wife, and then it was just a case of escalation. Let me kill my friend so that my ex will get back with me. Or, you know, I could call him. This is why she ended up in Arkham, which was also a terrible idea. She knew identities, but Ray put her there anyway. Maybe they truly were meant to be.
And at 4, punching through time. I love a good punch through time number. The Hulk is proven capable of punching his way through temporal and spatial dimensions. Weird, right? The science behind this one is a little bit sketchy, if we're being honest, hence why it finds a place on this list. Now, in the Incredible Hulk issue 135, the character came up against Kang the Conqueror and followed him through the time stream and started punching through it so hard that he made it through to the past. In issue 304, he would be banished to another dimension and encountered old foes, the UFOs, which is their name, and punched Ironclad so hard that it would shake the entire multiverse. He also once tore the fabric of reality by using his thunderclap, or rather a sonic clap, which used sound waves that discharged enough of a burst that they could rip apart the very seams of reality, as seen in Incredible Hulk issue 126. He's so strong that he can f with your reality, essentially, so maybe don't piss off the Hulk ever. I mean, you wouldn't want to, because you'd probably like you anyway, so.
Number 3. Dr. Doom vs. Office Supplies. This comic is from 2006, and its full title is Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four in Brain Drain, Teachers Count / Office Max Custom Comic number 1. This comic features Dr. Doom trying to drain the intelligence out of the children of the world. But really what this story is about is being sponsored by Office Max and featuring some actual teachers. This is a PSA comic, so a public service announcement. Its message is that teachers need to be paid more. How it delivers that message, well, basically it's trying to talk about how they have to contend with real world issues like having to buy their own office supplies, but then goes, thankfully there's Office Max, so they're super affordable, hint hint. And also they take on ignorance, such as Dr. Doom's brain drain machine. This comic does have some stellar moments though, such as the teachers throwing office supplies at Doom, and also Reed being impressed by the Office Max supply store. He's actually like, wow, look at all these supplies, rubber bands and a ball. Reed is impressed by many things, but a ball of rubber bands? Okay, sure Jan. Number 2. Magneto was Zorn all along. This arc and the retcon that had to be done afterwards are still confusing to people. So Zorn debuted in the new X-Men Annual number 1, and he existed, like he was real, only at some point he was replaced by Magneto, and no one noticed, because Magneto sort of mimicked the abilities that Zorn had, and he was masked. But then he was unmasked, and haha, with the help of Chinese supporters, it was Magneto the whole time, and he wasn't dead, and he did all this, pretended to be a teacher for months because he wanted to infiltrate the X-Men. So yeah, this was clearly a reveal to be a reveal, and then they had to retcon it away, and it doesn't even make sense how they did it. Just why? Unpopular opinion, I think this entire run by Grant Morrison is overrated. Leave your unpopular opinions down below. I can see them now. You're overrated. You move your hands too much. Number 1. Big Barda and Superman are kidnapped to make a porno. So for this we need to go back to Action Comics number 592, and in this story, poor Barda, who is just adjusting to her life on Earth, tries to stop a crime, only to end up in the sewers and kidnapped by a villain called the Sleaze, who lives up to his name and then some. He can control people's emotions and force them to do his bidding, and his plan at first is just to make her dance for him. But by happenstance, Superman ends up tracking Sleaze to the sewers, and then they both end up under his control, and his next plan is to take them to a pornographer to shoot an official porn movie for the money. The worst part, they're both fighting it the entire time, but can't. Thankfully, they're saved by Barda's husband, Mr. Miracle, and all they've done is kiss. Okay, this plan, it makes sense, it's just really gross and icky. It's not even a bad story, it just leaves you feeling like you need several showers. It's a super petty, weak plan. I mean, Sleaze, you were from Apocalypse, and this is the best you got? Actually, I'm kinda glad. If this was the B plan, I don't want to see the A plan. It's probably, like a superhero orgy or something. Number 10. Phage. Phage first appeared in Venom Lethal Protector number 4, which was a 6-issue miniseries from 1993, but he wasn't named until 2012 in Carnage USA number 2. Phage is one of 5 symbiotes forcefully bred out of Venom. The siblings are Agony, Riot, Lasher, and Scream. The Phage would later combine with 3 of its siblings, Riot, Lasher, and Agony, to form the better known Hybrid symbiote. So from then on we're dealing with Hybrid and Hybrid's bondings. This all came about because of the success of the first Venom Venom offspring, Carnage, and while people always want to repeat success. However, few of the symbiote offshoots have proved as popular or long-lasting as Carnage. Carnage first debuted in The Amazing Spider-Man number 361 in 1992. That was as a full appearance. Like Venom before him, he had had a cameo appearance the issue prior. And also like Venom before him, his host Cletus Cassidy had been pre-established. All factors on top of his design and absolute bloodlust that made him much more memorable of a character than Phage to most. Still, Marvel has been riding the more and more symbiotes ride ever since. And just look at what they've got Kate's doing with Absolute Carnage. Number 9. Ruin Venom. Runes, depends how you want to say it. This symbiote comes to us from Ruin vs. Venom number 1 in 1995, and has direct connection to Planet of the Symbiotes, which was a 5-issue event from 1995, and actually had to do with the fallout over the creation of the 5 forcibly bred symbiotes we just talked about. Also, the planet in question is Earth, don't get excited. Ruins is a murder mystery, which I'm about to ruin, so heads up. Ruin Venom involves a symbiote that survived the seeming death of all invading symbiotes from the planet arc, and bonds to Ruin. So, who is Ruin? Well, Ruin was an extreme vampire-like creature created in the 90s who debuted in Sludge number 1. He begins framing Venom for murders around town by writing Venom in huge letters next to the victim. Copying Carnage much? Of course the media falls for it. However, Ruin Venom runs into some problems, not only when real Venom comes to investigate, but also when Ruin begins to suspect some of his actions are being influenced. Ruin.
Up next to number 8, one of my personal favorites, Batman's plot armor. Alright, hear us out on this one, my friends. Batman has this uncanny ability to always manage to defeat foes who, objectively speaking, could straight up murder him 5 times over. This is because the Cape Crusader is always prepared. It's like his shtick. And it's his plot armor. Plot armor is a term that refers to a character's unusual ability to survive infinite damage due to their importance to the story. And who isn't more important than Batman? I mean, sure, you could argue Superman, but hey, the duo are pretty darn special and arguably the most iconic superheroes of all time. Anywho, just take a look at Batman's history and it's easy to see this happen. Hell, look at the Tower of Babel's story. Batman, being the paranoid and hyper-intelligent individual he is, literally came up with a plan to stop every single superpowered peer of his on the Justice League team, just in case one of them lost their shit and turned bad. I mean, in the long run, it was a good plan, but still, he's obsessive. And he's also rarely outdone because of that. He's arguably one of the only heroes who are a match for the Man of Steel, despite, not having any superpowers whatsoever. Money and brains don't technically count as a superpower, friends.
Number 7. ZZZXX. Yes, I said Z. It's Canada up here. This is a more recent addition who debuted in X-Men Kingbreaker number 2 in 2009. This symbiote is a Clintar and a mutant, and it eats brains. It was discovered by the Shi'ar. The most interesting thing about this symbiote, aside from its rather random letter-centric name, is how it was weaponized against the Charles Xavier from the Cancerverse, which was a realm introduced in the Realm of Kings crossover comic 2010, a universe ruled by evil organic masses. So the Xavier in this universe was a planet-sized brain, and for a brain eater like ZZZXX, a match made in heaven. This could really have hit the zombie element harder with the symbiote, but I mean, they have Marvel Zombies for that. Number 6. Mania. Mania first debuted in Venom number 1 in 2003. This symbiote is a clone of Venom, which, given Marvel's history with dragging out perfectly good clone sagas until the entire creative staff behind them is permanently traumatized, I'm amazed a direct clone like this hadn't happened sooner. Also, it was only named Mania in 2011 when Venom relaunched. So this clone was created using a piece of Venom's tongue, which is hardly surprising. That tongue is everywhere. From the start, the symbiote was sadistic, refusing to bond with awkward hosts, instead torturing and killing them, sometimes by pulling up the worst fears from their memories and then acting on those. The thing with Mania is that it's hard to track, because a bunch of things that happen, such as it being reabsorbed into Eddie's symbiote, are no longer considered canon. Now, Mania is just kind of around and brought out when necessary, but since Kate's and the ridiculous amount of symbiotes he's been creating, we'll see how some of these other symbiotes fare. Number 5. Endosim Armor. This first debuted in the Superior Iron Man number 1 in 2014. So in 2014, Marvel had an event called Axis, which many do not remember too fondly. Cliff Notes: Avengers and X-Men versus the Red Skull controlling Xavier and Onslaught. After all of this, Tony's personality was flipped So now he was Dark Tony. And so he created the Armor Mark 50, a smart liquid metal mesh incorporating symbiote elements. What could go wrong? Also, I can't hear liquid metal without thinking about Terminator 2. It's actually kinda sad. This was a mindless artificial symbiote that was entirely controlled via artificial intelligence, and then cast aside when Tony's personality flipped back. Superior Iron Man was an interesting time. 100% it just existed because of how well Superior Spider-Man had done. But you know, that one had stakes. Shots fired, I'm sorry. I actually have a soft spot for the aesthetic of this armor. Number 4, the Silver Agent. Astro City, that's right, Astro City time. I love Astro City and we don't talk about it enough. I will make all of the reaches to get characters on it on this list. So Astro City parallels the different eras in the mainstream superhero development, like actually historically. So the Silver Agent is their big Silver Age patriotic hero. And okay, so Astro City isn't told in order. Instead, it jumps around to different tales from Astro City's history. So the Silver Agent's tales revealed in bits and pieces. So at the start, we know that he was a hero and that the city has a monument to him, as what happened to him is their greatest shame. So the Silver Agent's story involves time travel, and he is traveling back through his own timeline, and each time he gets a little bit more powerful. So to the city, he appears magical and to just be ever increasing in strength, but really he is being charged by the time travel energy as he moves back and forward further and further. He gains super strength, flight, and more, and with his heroic nature he couldn't not jump in to stop situations he saw unfolding. However, the Silver Agent actually gifted his energy to the city when he returned to be executed for a crime he didn't commit, something only revealed after his death, hence their great shame. Astro City is just a ride. Like how the Samaritan has fought his enemy the Infernal to such a standstill that they just go to dinner once a year to see if either is close to coming over to the other side. I could talk about this all day. Number 3, Spider-Man India. So Spider-Man India was a miniseries that lasted 4 issues in between 2004 and 5, and blended elements of Spider-Man mythos with more mythological elements. The concept was conceived by an Indian director who had met with Stan Lee to discuss creating an Indian superhero. Symbiotes in this universe are demons, fanged, tusked demons who once ruled but were captured in an amulet. When the amulet was found, it turned the host into the Green Goblin. The demon would hop from the Green Goblin to Spider-Man, but be expelled, but before this it is called Venom. The amulet is destroyed, but not Venom. He's always a menace, no matter the Earth. Number 2, the Beyonder. For this version we have to go to yet another one of Marvel's humor issues. These issues have brought us such gems as What If Black Panther Was White? Now I give you the Beyonder. Just let the pun wash over you. Live in it. Be the pun. This comes to us from the What the ? A self-parodying comic series for silly jokes. Its tagline was, the Marvel mag of mirth and mayhem. The Beyonder is this universe's version of the Beyonder, who gives Spider-Ham a version of the black uniform. But it's not a symbiote. I just want to tell you about the Beyonder. It's fun to say for me, but it's probably not fun for you to listen to. Number 1, Scorn. Scorn first debuted in Carnage number 5 in 2011. So Scorn was created out of a piece of Carnage left in space after Carnage was torn in half by the Sentry, but he got better. The Sentry may be one of the most powerful beings out there, but Carnage has plot armor and sells comics, so take that, Sentry. The pieces are collected to attempt to create prosthetic limbs, so the first thing that the symbiote bonds to is a prosthetic arm. Because of this, Scorn can bond to technology. Now this is an element that some find confusing, and also there are other story elements that make Scorn a bit convoluted. Things like how Cassidy was alive and had been preserved by Carnage and was repaired by these prosthetics. Again, you can't kill Carnage. Scorn was eventually corrupted by Null, the symbiote god, and started a cult to worship him. She was killed by Carnage after offering herself to him. Absolute carnage. There is so much carnage going on right now. So those were some more obscure symbiotes. I gave myself some caveats. No Venom, no Carnage, no Riot. I wanted some that maybe people might not recognize. Especially if you're not up to date on your symbiote history and if you missed the 90s when so much of this happened. I hope this was a gateway and maybe gave you some stuff to check out. Or to avoid, who knows?
So number 10, we've got Scarlet Witch. Now, okay, yes, I know some of you guys out there in the real world, you're gonna defend her and you're gonna say, hey, I know her powers, it's great, that's fantastic. So, let's get a little bit of a backstory here. So the first time we saw her was in 1964 in X-Men number 4. She had many appearances in comics over the years, and actually, when she first appeared, her first real big problem was that she didn't have really defined powers. That's right. Her powers initially were called hex powers, and she could just basically do anything and could cause random events to just happen. She pretty much was a wild card for any tough
plot points that the writers had. So some things that she would do is, cause Ultron to short circuit randomly and even cause gas mains to just explode, and it wasn't until Kirk Busiek decided that her powers would be all about manipulating chaos. That's when we got a better picture. But however, that didn't really sit well, because by the time we got to the Avengers Disassembled series, she pretty much had the ability to warp reality. However, most people identify her as having chaos magic being used to her advantage. What is chaos magic? Well, your guess is as good as mine. Number 9, we got Miss Marvel, or Carol Danvers, appearing in 1968. Now, in the past, she has had so many problems. As a matter of fact, today she still has a lot. As a matter of fact, most people identify her as Marvel's version of Superman. Pretty much the female version of that. She's got super strength, stamina, all that sort of stuff. She can fly. Being half human and half Kree gives her a bunch of different abilities, and when she could fly back in the day, the only way she could do it was through a belt device. She also could tap into the energy of a white hole, which is a reverse black hole, which, by the way, has never been identified by man at all in history. This allowed her to control things like gravity, heat, and many other aspects of different spectrums. This also allowed her to survive in the vacuum of space, and she can fly 6 times the speed of sound, and yes, she can explode energy out of her hands, fingertips, all that sort of stuff. And apparently, she also has the ability of 7th sense.
Moving on to number 8, Husk. Many people might assume that Husk has shapeshifting abilities, but that is not the case. The character, who first appeared in ROM Annual Issue 3 in 1984, has the ability to remove 1 layer of skin, or husk if you will, which then reveals a different layer of skin made out of an entirely different composition. So essentially, she sheds 1 layer of skin, and the layer of epidermis beneath can be something the likes of metal or stone or something entirely different. She's a metamorph who has made her skin into glass, wood, rubber, diamond, granite, brick, and even adamantium in the past. This can increase her weight, strength, or invulnerability in the process depending on the material. So she becomes diamond, she becomes impervious to an extent. Rubber, she gets bouncy. She even once generated heat and flame, and has even produced acidic skin. Now, aside from being kinda gross, think of like all that dead skin she sheds, it's easy to see why some would mistake Husk for a shapeshifter. Although, technically speaking, she kind of is, but it's a weird process in which she does it, and very limited. Can just be her skin.
Number 7, you got Black Knight, or Dane Whitman. Now, an older Avenger dating back to around 1967. He's actually the descendant of the original Black Knight comics. He gets his powers mainly from his magic sword. He became the Black Knight after he got his famous winged horse Aragorn. Now, he joined the Avengers to defeat Kang the Conqueror originally. He didn't really have any superpowers to begin with. This all changed, however, after he bonded with his teammate Circe. This was after she was injured and his fellow Eternal named Icarus attempted to stabilize her by merging the two together. He's apparently a good swordsman and can hold up against Captain America, and he's a bit of a scientist, understands genetic engineering. His powers might not be a mystery, but he definitely is. Number 6, we got Vision. Okay, yeah, we've all seen him. We all know basically he is a robot. Some people identify him more or less as a human being, but is made out of, synthetic materials. Okay. Now, what's different about him from the movies is in the comics, he's got a solar jewel on top which absorbs solar energy, which can actually also discharge energy at any time. He also can fire beams of microwaves and infrared radiation. Very helpful to know. On top of that, he can also become extremely massive. This is confusing because apparently he does this by harnessing the power from some unknown dimension. This also makes him change in density. Being an android means he has super strength and all the other great attributes that other heroes have. As of recent comics, he can also split himself into smaller parts and change shape, but that's good old-fashioned nanotechnology at its best. Number 5, we got Mantis, probably my least favorite hero that I've ever seen brought to the screen. She's been around since 1973, so you gotta give her some credit there. Her origin, though, is completely unknown. Literally, she talks about herself in third person, and she says this one came from a place she must not name. To reach a place no man must know. So I guess, you don't really know where she's from. She also trained in martial arts. Boom, bam, that's good. And she apparently can even, or at least almost beat Captain America. Her biggest and strongest power is obviously using psychic empathy, which means she can feel other people's emotions, man. Basically, she's Deanna Troi from Star Trek. This allows her to figure out also a person's weak spot where she can immediately, boom, knock them out. She's apparently really strong, and with that, she's never ever, well, only once has she ever lost in a hand-to-hand combat. situation. On top of that, she has the ability to meditate and heal herself. In some series, she can even sense the future.
Number 4. Magic Venom. Getting real recent now. Magic Venom debuted in Venom Volume 4 number 13 in 2019, and has ties to the War of the Realms event. The one that people on the outside like to make fun of because the lead villain is Malekith, the dark elf from Thor 2 The Dark World. Well, he was from elsewhere first, but that's where many know him from now. And there's been this odd campaign to make Thor 2 relevant again. It's been very interesting. War of the Realms actually starts with him already having conquered all the other realms, so you're stuck in the lamest one. This one, Midgard, Earth. Again, I live here. Give me Alfheim or Valheim, somewhere else. Anyways, everyone has to band together and stop him. In this arc, Eddie and Venom are separated, so he is given a dream stone by a dark elf who is hoping to recruit him. The dream stone acts as an artificial symbiote, but is a mindless one, and Eddie ultimately uses pieces of the suit to save civilians.
Number 3, we've got Moonlight, that appeared in Werewolf by Night number 32. That was hard to say. 1975. Mark Spector is his alter ego. He is human. He's got a lot of similarities between him and Batman. Started off as a boxer, a costumed hero. However, he got his superpowers after he visited an Egyptian moon god. And yes, that means he gets a certain amount of strength depending on the phase of the moon. Apparently, at one point he even lost his powers because he was disobedient. Yo, you bad Moonlight. You said and now you're done. I don't know what that means. It's also been said that Moonlight has multiple personalities which make him immune to psychic attacks. He also uses what is known as carbondanium armor, which yes, is not a real armor. This allows him to lock joints and so he can lift more. On top of that, he can jump out of his armor and use it to hold buildings from falling over, which he's done in the past, and then he's fought villains in his underwear. Oh yeah. Does not fly anywhere. He has the mooncopter, kind of like the bat plane. I don't know why Marvel has not got sued for that. Number 2, you got Novar, a rather new superhero debuting in the year 2000 for Marvel Boy number 1. Now he is part Kree, part cockroach. That's right. He's also a part of the Dark Avengers. Now because he is half Kree and he has insect DNA, he's got a lot of strength, agility, stamina, that sort of thing. Not as appealing as Spider-Man though. Nobody really wants to hang out with a cockroach. What his power is he can also control his neurological impulses, so he can remove himself from feeling any sort of pain. He can also suppress his emotions, which can hinder him from winning a battle. This is simply known as Whiterun, where he removes anything from his thoughts. So basically that cute girl that's in the red dress while he's fighting Thanos, that girl ain't getting hit on at all. Also, Novar's salvia can infect people. I mean, like, he's a bug. He can scale walls and get into small places because he's triple jointed. And yes, like a bug, he can digest almost anything, which can repair himself. And like most superheroes, he knows science pretty well, which for this guy, he helped develop interdimensional travel. I don't know how you do that. But number 1, probably the worst of them all, is 3D Man. Oh god. Debuted in 1977 and should have stayed there. Basically the story is Chuck Chandler was captured by the Skrull invaders and he got turned into a 2-dimensional being. However, his brother Hal ended up putting on these glasses and could see his brother, and if he concentrated hard enough, boom, Chuck materialized into a 3-dimensional weird being. Basically done obviously through the advancement of radiation, of course. But the thing is, apparently when Hal puts on the glasses, it renders him unconscious, and of course, 3D Man goes to fight the world. 3D Man also has superhero strength, and you know what? I'm just done. That has got to be the most ridiculous one of them all. That's the icing on the cake.
And at number 10, interdimensional travel, The Flash. Complex powers, yay! The Flash's second iteration in the form of Silver Age baby Barry Allen tends to take the laws of science and just twist them, making them arguably inconceivable in our real world, but really neat to see on the panels of DC's comics. Of course, that lends itself to be a tad confounding. Such is the Flash's interdimensional travel powers. Now, according to the comics, the Flash can vibrate his body at a molecular level, which allows him to transfer himself between dimensions. Now initially this was something that could only be achieved by his cosmic treadmill, but in later years he gained the ability to do this himself by increasing the intensity and speed of his vibrations. Now to make things a little bit more complicated, adjusting those two factors acts as a means for a lot of the things that Barry can do, but more on that in a bit. Up next, number 9, talking to fish. Aquaman, of course. While Aquaman's ability to communicate with aquatic life has long been the butt of many jokes aimed at the DC's King of Atlantis, there's actually been some major retconning over the years when it comes to the scope of this ability and how it's defined, and just in general how people understand it. It's not just like chatting with a fish. For example, in the New 52, in the first issue of Aquaman, Arthur Curry is chilling at a restaurant when he's mildly harassed by other customers there, who make a point of saying that everyone knows Aquaman talks to fish. Arthur does not hesitate to clear this up, noting that, I quote, "Fish don't talk. Their brains are too primitive to carry on a conversation. I reach into their midbrains and telepathically push them to help me out. Squids, sharks, eels, it's all the same, though dolphins are another story." Now, many of the jokes surrounding Aquaman, primarily spawned from the Super Friends cartoon of the past, were dealt with head-on by Jeff Johns in this series, and it was actually a pretty solid start to the Aquatic Heroes New 52 comic. Now let's flash forward though to the Justice League Aquaman Drowned Earth Special 1 and Justice League issue 11, more recent Rebirth comics. DC started exploring grander concepts here. And similar to Barry Allen's Speed Force connection, Arthur Curry has a connection to something called Life Force, which apparently, according to Scott Snyder, could suggest that Aquaman might have the ability to communicate with all life. And yes, that is still pretty confusing, especially when DC has noted that they haven't changed Aquaman's powers, but rather just want to expand the meaning of them. Right. But hey, he doesn't talk to fish one-on-one, so there you go. That solves that question. Just leave it as the New 52 explanation. I'm sure people will be fine with that.
And at number 8, Ambush Bug. First appearing in DC Comics Presents number 52, Ambush Bug was initially presented as a villain to Superman and the Doom Patrol. He appeared as a self-centered villain who wore a skin-tight green suit, which made him look more or less like a bug. Any and all powers he had were just devices he had hidden away in his suit somewhere. Ambush Bug was so popular, however, that he was brought back more and more until eventually they transitioned him from being a villain into a third-wall-breaking hero, very akin to Deadpool. His appearances in comics nowadays are very sporadic and get weirder and weirder every time, and his powers are pretty much whatever the writers want them to be.
Moving on to number 7, the electromagnetic spectrum vision from Martian Manhunter. Similar to our previous Flash number, here we have a sophisticated ability that occasionally goes over some readers' heads, and hey, not criticizing with that. Scientific logic in comic books is very different than the laws reality follows, as we mentioned earlier. Martian Manhunter, who will be making another appearance on this list a little later on, is a complex character. Yes, he is a green Martian from Mars, but he also is a being who has a plethora of powers, some of which are a little difficult to wrap your head around. Ja'on Jones is capable of seeing across the electromagnetic spectrum. What on earth does that entail? So, you know how Superman has that nifty X-ray vision of his? Now think of this power as a ridiculously amped up version of that. Nicknamed Martian Vision, it allows Ja'on to not only use X-ray vision but to see infrared, ultraviolet, and microwave wavelengths. While we don't entirely know how this is visually represented to the Martian, since there's yet to be a proper POV panel featuring this in DC Comics, or at least that we know of, let us know if we're wrong in the comments. But we can imagine that it would share some similarities to how the Predators in Predators see other kinds of heat signatures or wavelengths, so hey. Speaking of characters with vast skill sets, that brings us to our next number. And at number 6, Shazam, and like all of his powers. Shazam is one of those characters whose befuddling history often leads to those less familiar with the hero getting confused with the full range of his powers, and also getting him confused with Marvel's Captain Marvel. But like, there is reason to get confused. So for starters, if you are unaware, Shazam used to be called Captain Marvel back when the character was owned by Fawcett Comics, the original publisher who created Billy Batson back in the Golden Age. Back then, he would say the word Shazam and he would be transformed from a boy to a grown man with superpowers. That still remains the same. DC though would eventually buy out the rights to Fawcett properties after DC basically sued them for the character being too similar to Superman. Fawcett essentially went bankrupt. It's actually pretty tragic. Now by that time, Marvel had already published their Captain Marvel, so DC changed the character's name to Shazam moving forward so there wouldn't be any confusion and more lawsuits. If that wasn't confusing enough, let's take a look at the abilities that Shazam has. And also, just to clear this up, when he says Shazam, the magic word, that is also the name of the wizard who gave Billy his powers, but it's also an acronym for what his powers do. Shazam is made up of the names and abilities of 6 immortal elders. First, there's Solomon, who gives him his wisdom. Then there's Hercules, who gives him his strength. Atlas, who has stamina and invulnerability. Zeus, which gives him immortality, electricity generation and manipulation, power over lightning, and basically all things electric. Next up is Achilles, who gives him his willpower and superhuman durability. And courage. And lastly, Mercury, who gives him his speed and flying abilities. All in all, there is a lot going on there, and it's a lot more detailed than what we just went through. It would be easy to see how some of those abilities could be confusing to some, especially when there is that common belief that Shazam is basically just Superman but goofier, which he kind of is, to be fair. And at number 5, Green Lantern's ability to create kryptonite. Green Lantern's ring can do a whole lot of stuff aside from creating light constructs. It can store a whole lot of crap, including a whole planet, which is kind of insane. But that's not the ring's ability that we're focusing on today, despite how silly that may seem to some. In 1999's Superman Man of Tomorrow issue 13, Green Lantern busts out a brand new trick that seems like a Deus Ex Machina of sorts. Superman was on a rampage, and Martian Manhunter was like, yo, I'm gonna use my telepathy to read the formula for kryptonite from Superman's mind. Yes, just keep following me here, friends. Then he sent that formula to Green Lantern Kyle Rayner to duplicate as a means of fighting the Man of Steel. Supes managed to evade the attack, but it still felt a little extra, almost devaluing the rarity of kryptonite as an organic material. I mean, if Green Lanterns can just create it, like, Superman would pretty much be dead if that got into the wrong hands. Just saying. It makes no sense.
Number 4, we got Star Fox, and I'm not talking about the good Star Fox. I'm talking about this Star Fox from Marvel. Part of the Eternals group, he appeared first in 1973. Basically, he ages really slowly because he uses cosmic energy. This also makes him extremely hard to hurt because the energy protects him from falls and impacts and other things like that. However, bullets and knives can hurt him, and not just emotionally. However, Star Fox in some series has been able to manipulate gravity using psychokinesis. He also knows apparently 500 alien languages. But his most important power of all is he is capable of activating the pleasure area of enemies' brains, which pretty much helps them calm down so he can win the battle. So I guess you could say, sexiness is his power. Yeah.
And at number 3, Kryptonian Coma, talking Superman. Oh, the death of Superman, my absolute favorite story arc ever. That was sarcasm, people, in case you did not pick up on the obvious. Fans of this channel know I have major beef with this arc. Every time it comes up in a video, I go on a tangent about how terrible it was, how it pretty much ruined the concept of death in mainstream comics, and how it was all just a big sham for DC to pull in a bunch of extra dollars. Long story short, and skipping over some of the hilariously bad and nonsensical plot points here, Doomsday comes to Earth. He and Superman engage in what can only be called a punching match to see who can punch harder. They punch each other so hard that they punch each other to death at the same time. And both are believed to be dead, but turns out, surprise, neither is. The problem is, a whole long and painfully tedious story event was drawn out of Superman's death, in which a bunch of dollar store Superman replacements showed up, and a side story where Green Lantern turned homicidal was a thing. He was merely in a Kryptonian coma, which apparently makes it look like he's dead with no pulse, no breathing, the whole shabam. So everyone in the story was like, whoa, Superman, thank God you're not actually dead. You pulled a fast one on us with that power of yours that makes zero sense, but okay. Perhaps this number is more baffling than confusing, being something that felt so far-fetched rather than a reasonable plot point. It's all about that money grab. Moving on to number 2, quantum tunneling. We're talking the Flash here, friends. Quantum tunneling is just a fancy name for phasing. It is the Flash's ability to vibrate at such a high speed and at such a high intensity that he can pass through solid objects. See what I mean about those two things being a factor in like a bunch of his powers? And here's where it gets real fun and bewildering. In the New 52 and Flash issue 3, Flash depicts the ability to transfer his quantum tunneling to objects that he touches. He phases a whole airplane through a bridge. Scientifically, we're not even going to try to explain how that is possible. We just know that he becomes practically invisible, and in order for this to work, he needs to calculate the frequency of his vibrations, or else it could get real messy. Like phasing through an object halfway and then, you know, getting dead. It's also a power that has varied amongst different iterations of the Flash, with Barry Allen seemingly having a better grasp over it than Wally West. And finally, in our number 1 spot, the 9 senses of Martian Manhunter. Human beings have 5 senses. Martian Manhunter? Well, he's got 9 of them. Aside from being a concept that is strenuous to comprehend, we can't help but be slightly perplexed by what on Earth, or Mars rather, all of those senses possibly do. It almost seems like a completely made up ability that DC just threw into the character's skill set for the fun of it. So out of the 9, 5 are the human senses that we have, but the extra 4 have never fully been defined in the comics. There is a fan theory that one of his 9 senses is a precognitive one. In Martian Manhunter's early days, the character exhibited precognitive abilities. Regardless, Ja'an's 9 senses tops our list simply because there is no possible way for us to understand them, simply because they've never really been explained to us. And also, humans can probably better sympathize with 5 senses than a whole extra 4 that we don't have. All we can really do is speculate. We know that Martian Martian Vision isn't considered to be one of them, and thanks to JLA Year 1 Issue 6, we know that if his eyes were removed, he would still have the other 8 senses, meaning the additional 4 have nothing to do with vision. But thanks to Jack Kirby, there is reason to believe that those 4 senses are chopped up to abilities that he was shown as having in Detective Comics issue 226, in his second appearance ever. Those include telepathy, telekinesis, empathetic precognition, and molecular hypnosis, although those tend to be listed as separate powers of his these days compared to being one of the 9 senses. So all in all, a little confusing. Oh boy.
Starting off at number 10, we have Magic, or Ilyana Rasputin, named after a really bad Russian guy. Not really. She first appeared in 1975 in the Giant Size X-Men issue number 1. Now, she originated from Lake Baikal, Russia, which, on a side note, by the way, is one of the oldest, most clearest lakes in the entire world. It's also one of the deepest lakes. It's the 7th largest lake in the world. Okay, a little bit of a side fact there, I kinda like that sort of stuff. Let's get back to Magic. Now Magic, she was taken to the United States of America by a villain known as Arcade. Eventually though, she was rescued and became a glorious member of the X-Men, but her powers consisted of teleportation, where she brings out these little stepping discs which originate from a dimension known as Limbo. Now she's capable of teleporting not just in small regions but across continents, and she can even teleport through space and time. Crazy, I know, which others cannot do. She also has the ability to form her own armor, which when she uses her magic more from the Limbo universe, it just gets stronger. And that's what makes people wonder, is exactly what this universe is and how does she manage to harness this energy? It's really unknown. However, she's a sorceress of the Limbo universe, and that's all we got. As a matter of fact, she ended up absorbing all of the Limbo universe, which pretty much nowadays when she teleports, weird images of ghosts and dragons and other creatures now appear. I have no idea. It's comic books. Number 9, we've got Michael Pointer, or simply known as Omega. He's actually got a few different names as well, I'll get into that. Now originally he was just a simple postman before he found out that he was a mutant. He's capable of not just absorbing people and mutants for their powers, but he can also take on personalities, that's right. His powers have always been extremely strong that his suit had to be made by Reed Richards so he could regulate his powers. There was also a point in his superhero career where he absorbed the power of 50 mutants and Zorn. Zorn merged with Michael Pointer and ended up killing almost all the members of Alpha Flight. The thing with Michael Pointer is that he does not need to touch mutants to take the power, he could just be right near them. It's kinda silly. And he actually managed to almost take all of the powers from every single mutant on Earth. He's kinda like Superman of absorption, an unstoppable machine with his powers having unknown origins. Yep. I could write for comic books.
Number 8, Jack Hawksmoor. He is a member of the Authority. This is a Justice League-esque team published by Wildstorm Comics, featuring the characters from Stormwatch. Most people know it because Apollo, the Superman pastiche, and the Midnighter, the Batman pastiche, were married. Yes, I said were. People think of other things too, but this comes up a lot. You know it's true. Okay, so Jack Hawksmoor. He debuted in Stormwatch number 37 back in 1996, and has been in the Authority since issue 1. And he can't survive outside of an urban environment. So no trips to the country for him. When in the city, he has superpowers that are tied to the city. These include super strength and agility, just like a city. Telepathic control, and he can animate objects in the city, like the buildings. This varies a little bit from city to city, and Jack acts like each city is a unique entity, which in a way they are. City doesn't feel like a word to me anymore. He one time turned a city into a battle suit for him to wear. He also doesn't need to eat because he converts air pollution into sustenance, so he must be doing great. He can transport between cities in a mini womb thing. What's the confusing part here is, why does the city do this to him? He was modified by humans from the 70th century, which caused him to have these powers. You have a lot of freedom with this. You can do some zany things based on the cities he's in. My plan is just to go into a field in the middle of nowhere and stand there. He's done. These modifications were made to him so he could fight a threat from the future. A city-based threat, clearly.
Number 7, we got Glob Herman. Now the coolest guy, but the lamest name at the same time. First appeared in what was known as the New X-Men Volume 2, 138. The Prime of Miss Emma Frost, May 2013 issue. Now this guy is made up of essentially living wax. It's known as bioparaffin, and his internal organs are pretty much viewable. You can see it, so you can see his bones, they float inside, it's really cool. Now bioparaffin apparently reacts to heat extremely well, and what we do know that this stuff gives him great strength, and at one point he acted as a major heat shield for the X-Men Academy class when they transported to Sword Base. At one point he joined fellow classmates in the Omega game, Glob ended up attacking civilians and joined in the fight against the X-Men. Now the X-Men succeeded in taking him down by burning off that wax layer. He also is known to flick his wax off in small portions, and besides real awesome strength, we don't really know what else it does. Number 6, Shatterstar. I do like the name of this. First appeared in 1991, a part of the New Mutants series. Now, he still remained very popular. As a matter of fact, he was in the second Deadpool movie. He originated from a planet called Mojo World, which was also a century in the future and in another dimension, and I'll get to that and his powers in a short bit. Basically, he's a genetically engineered individual, and he learned to fight in the arenas on Mojo World. Now, for his powers, he has superhero strength, he can time travel, and also dimension travel. Pretty awesome. He also has extreme senses, keeping him alert, and his weapon, which is a staff, is extremely strong. At one point, he was capable of hitting the Thing into a building, which is like, what? I don't know how you do that. Because he was also engineered, his bones are hollow, so he can go really fast. As a matter of fact, he's expected to be able to dodge machine gun fire at point blank range. He's also extremely intelligent and can learn things like languages very quickly. Number 5, we got Gold Balls. Probably the worst name for a hero, but I mean, let's be perfectly honest, it's self-explanatory. He pretty much takes these gold balls that he can just produce and projects them from any part of his body. On top of that, he can call in an infinite amount of them, and like he can not only shoot them in a straight line, but he can also direct them. Pretty weird kind of ability. I mean, magic balls that can also grow in size. Wouldn't the ladies love that? Yeah.
Number 4, The Question. If you've never read a Question comic before, I highly recommend it. This guy is one of my favorite all-time DC heroes, and he does not get enough love around here. Whether it be Vic Sage or Renee Montoya wearing the non-face of The Question, you're going to have an awesome time reading any issue. However, the abomination we got from the New 52 still hurts me deep in my soul. This Question was a man who committed a crime so horrible that the most powerful wizards in existence removed his face, wiped his memory, threw him into the 21st century, and damned him to forever speak in questions. It was so bad, it was retconned a few years later, but still, like, never touch this garbage. Regardless, this version of Vic Sage somehow gained amazing detective skills and became a master of disguise. I guess the wizards who cursed him in the first place didn't want him to be completely useless.
Number 3, Forge, a man of great technology, and not just good at inventing things, but he can also perceive mechanical energy in action, which basically means he can look at something and go, ah, that's how you use it. Pretty much, he's a guy that just went to Harvard University for engineering and walked out and said, yep, I'm smart. Actually, to be perfectly honest, it's not realistically through intelligence, more or less like technological instinct. Sometimes he'll make something or figure something out and he doesn't really know why, and then he has to go back and he's like, oh, that's how I did it. On top of that, he's also a user of magic. He uses Native American magic, but simple, he's just like an Iron Man, just different. Number 2, you got Dazzler. Now she is one of the weirdest. I mean, I don't understand any of her powers. I don't know if she's still being made, but either way, apparently she can transduce sonic vibrations. She uses a range of frequencies, she uses the audible spectrum, and uses sound pressure levels. What does that mean? Well, apparently she uses sound and music because music is very pleasing to her. Yeah, that's right. She uses this energy to create light waves that can either put like a trance effect on her enemies. She can also blind her enemies. She is incapable of being blinded, and she also can create holograms and convert this energy to fly. How she does this, nobody really knows. Basically, it's a lot of BS, but it was probably designed by a music student. Number 1, we've got Rogue. I know a lot of you guys are gonna go, come on, really? But realistically, for me, I don't really understand Rogue. I mean, you guys already know a lot about Rogue, so I'm not going to get into the details of her, but we really don't understand her, powers to a degree. And one of the biggest problems is that she's had a different amount of abilities through time, and that's what gets really conflicting. Now, we all know that she has the ability to absorb other people's powers and other mutants' powers, so basically that means no kissy-kissy for her. Thank you. However, in some cases, she can also not just absorb their powers, but their memories, their personalities. Apparently, she can duplicate herself. into her victims. So I'm like, yeah, I feel like she's just the vampire of mutants, you know? At one point, she got so powerful she could do an instant death touch. After the Messiah complex, she had the ability to control her powers, so yeah, she could get it on and not kill somebody. It's great. She also apparently, you know, absorbed Miss Marvel's powers at one point, and even Wonder Man's powers, which she had a problem doing that in the past. But one thing is, when she absorbs the powers, her victims are sometimes unconscious for a while, and yeah, how she gets her powers, we don't really know.
And at number 10, Mogo. Hailing from the DC universe, Mogo is a sentient planet adrift in space, doing his best to look awesome and not do much else. Oh, and did I mention that he's also a part of the Green Lantern Corps? The Green Lanterns will literally hire anybody these days, even an immovable planet. Aside from being able to create constructs with his power ring, Mogo is also able to create holograms on his surface to simulate whatever he wants. How is this explained? Well, he's a giant superpowered planet who's also a space cop. Does it need any more explanation than that? And at number 9, Big Bertha. Ashley Crawford is a mutant who is able to control the fat distribution throughout her entire body. So during the day, she's one of the most beautiful supermodels the world has ever seen. But when trouble arises, she becomes Big Bertha, a really fat superhero with super strength. Now, I understand the concept of being able to redistribute your body mass to make yourself bulkier and, you know, more or less an immovable object, but where does the super strength come in? How does adding more mass onto her legs allow her to jump further, like it does in the comics? Wouldn't it be the opposite? Her powers are strictly defined as fat manipulation, so muscle shouldn't be involved in this at all. I'm so confused, Marvel. Why would you do this? Is she just like the female Blob? I need to know.
Number 8. Kuroba. Kuroba first debuted in Venom Seed of Darkness number 1 in 1997. Are you picking up on just how much Venom stuff was going on in the 90s? There was no escape. If you didn't like Venom, Godspeed. Side note, Kuroba's heading on the cover is The Living Darkness, and inside the book, he's called The Abyss That Walked. Pretty neat. So this is supposed to be a story that occurs before the current timeline, well, the then current timeline. Marvel will do this sometimes when they have a tale that really won't slot anywhere but isn't strong enough for a what if, or they're going through a period where they're not publishing what ifs. It's a pretty simple story. Kuroba bonds with a scientist, Dr. Don Levy. It tells him that it will help maintain knowledge, you know, the usual, but it tricks him. It's up to Eddie Brock to defeat him. I'm kidding, Eddie isn't Venom. In this story, he's still a not as good as Peter Parker photographer, so he observes and ponders on the nature of man and monster. This one is less hard to understand and more easy to miss.
Number 7. Hope Summers. Hope Summers is one of the most powerful mutants in all the 616 universe. Or is it the Prime universe now? I can never tell anymore. Hope was born at a time when no new mutants were supposed to emerge and unleashed a psionic blast so powerful it destroyed Cerebro. Was this psionic blast explained? Not really, but let's move on. It was later explained that Hope has the ability to mimic the abilities of mutants in her general vicinity, and is also able to boost the abilities of those around her. Mimicry is a pretty straightforward ability, right? So where does all this other stuff come from? Like, remember the time when she cured Rogue of the uncurable Strain 88 virus? Or remember when Rogue's touch could kill anyone, but it didn't kill Hope, she could just carry her around normally? And she's also undetectable by Cerebro, so is she even a mutant? I don't even know anymore. And at number 6, Deadman. Boston Brand was one of the greatest trapeze artists of all time and would captivate audiences under his stage name, Deadman. Unfortunately, during one of his routines, Boston was murdered and then resurrected as a ghost with the powers of possession. Using these powers, Boston, now only referring to himself as Deadman, attempts to solve the mystery of his own murder. Now, see, I love Deadman. I think he's a very unique character, and the stories he's involved with are really cool. However, sometimes his general power of possession gets a little muddled. As a ghost, he should be able to jump into whoever he wants, right? But no, he has a lot of restrictions. If somebody is already being mind controlled, no. Has magical power, no. Or someone who has a really strong will, no. So why does this happen? I know he needs obstacles in order to be a good character, but there's never a definitive reason as to why he can't possess these kinds of people. I mean, like, okay, hear me out. What if he tried really hard? Like, harder than he's ever tried before? Like, would it work? I don't know, you gotta tell me, DC. And at number 5, Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers used to have a pretty refined power set. Her body was altered after an explosion caused her DNA to be spliced with that of Kree alien DNA and Mar-Vell's. Danvers gained superhuman strength, endurance, stamina, and flight, and she became the first Ms. Marvel. She later became binary and gained the ability to absorb energy and then project it in photonic form. As binary, she became one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe. But in order to maintain that, she needed a constant stream of energy. What powers does Carol have now that she's Captain Marvel? Well, pretty much whatever the writers want. She can now fly 6 times faster than the speed of sound, can withstand and then absorb the explosion of a nuclear bomb, absorb magic, withstand the pressure of open space without batting an eye. But like, when did this happen? I understand characters evolving and growing over time to become better versions of themselves, but this power level spike happened like almost out of nowhere. And as far as I know, Marvel doesn't have a hyperbolic time chamber.
Number 4, we got Blink. Now, a member of Generation X, also in the film Days of Future Past, which is my favorite X-Men film, if you guys really wanted to know that. Now, she's extremely unstable. Sounds like a lot of mutants these days, but oh well. Now, she has the ability to not just teleport herself, but other people around her, which sometimes seems all too convenient. Now, this ability makes her being able to also teleport objects and other things that she can use against her enemies. As for how she does this, we don't really know.
And at number 3, Slapstick. I hate this character. I hate this character so much. Like, I really don't want to talk about this character. It's that bad. I wish it was Kelly or Sasha, but they left early and forced me to talk about this garbage. So here we go. Slapstick was exposed to a strange alien device that made his body indestructible at the cost of looking like a garish cartoon character that reeks of early 90s. He has the physics of a cartoon character and can be horribly beaten into a pulp, only to spring back up into perfect form. No matter how many times people try and murder him, he just springs back up and manages to beat them somehow. So that's it, I'm done with Slapstick. That point done, we're out. And at number 2, Kid Eternity. Kid Eternity is one of my favorite nonsensical heroes of all time. He has the power to summon any good historical or mythological figure by saying Eternity. So you can imagine his comics get really weird very fast. Kid Eternity was later revised to summon demons in the form of said fictional characters that he calls out into battle and then they fight for him. He is promptly murdered in the opening pages of JSA number 1. Then he came back 7 years later to help the Teen Titans fight Brother Blood to prevent him from gaining access to the Door of Life and Death. I told you, his stories get really weird. And in at number 1, Pre-Crisis Superman. Everyone in the world, regardless of whether or not you enjoy comics, knows who Superman is, right? Superman is an icon, with very straightforward powers, and even more straightforward origin for comics. He's an alien baby who came over from a dying planet and gets his powers from our sun. He's got super speed, super strength, can fly. Basically, he can do all the things you wish you could do as a kid. His powers can get a little ridiculous, you know, with like eye lasers and stuff, but you know, you put it all aside because it's a comic book, it's fun, right? But for the most part, you understand how these work. Now that we have established this, let me tell you that Pre-Crisis Superman does not work that way in the slightest. This guy is on a completely different level from who we know today. He has super strength with no limits and can move whatever he wants, including planets. His flight is unimpeded and has no limits. His supervision allowed him to see across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. He can hold his breath indefinitely, so he never has to breathe again. His only weaknesses were kryptonite and radiation from the red sun. But aside from that, nothing could hurt him. He literally flew into the core of a star unharmed. However, his best powers include super ventriloquism, super hypnotism, and the ability to wipe someone's mind with a kiss. What was DC's explanation for all these powers? Well, the sun. Yeah, that's it.
And at number 10, Karma. Karma is a character who first appeared in Marvel Team-Up issue 100 back in 1980. She came from Vietnam, having fled the country with her family during the war. She was one of the founding members of the New Mutants. Now, Karma has powerful psionic abilities that allow her to physically possess others, meaning she can take possession of the minds of humans or animals. This occurs by Karma projecting a psionic energy surge that overwhelms their consciousness and renders her victim unconscious, with Karma's own mind taking the wheel, so to speak. When Karma is in control, she can do some real damage, having the ability to alter her victim's memories, perceptions, reveal information to her, or have them fall asleep. She can even make their body work as if it were an extension of her own. But if she stays too long with a host, she risks her own personality becoming a subordinate to that host personality, becoming more and more like her victim. After an incursion with the Shadow King, Karma also gained the ability to mentally see through others' eyes, and she can protect herself from the psychic assault of others. Moving on to number 9, Joseph. Joseph, who only operates by a first name, is the clone of Magneto, but kind of sucks in comparison to him. This is why he's a bit baffling to some. He is a mutant clone who first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 327 from 1995, but he also died in a battle against the real Magneto and had a thing for Rogue really briefly. Now his abilities in theory should be the same as Magneto's if he's the iconic villain's clone, right? Well, that is not the case, hence why he's on this list. Sure, he is capable of generating powerful magnetic fields, but he can also generate electricity and electromagnetic radiation. And the real kicker? Well, he doesn't have the full range of Magneto's powers. He never demonstrated the same extent of those powers or some of the tricks that Magneto has been able to pull off over the years, like producing a wormhole. He lacks the mental barriers Magneto has, and therefore when he manipulates a ton of energy, he often causes damage to himself. Sucks for you, Joseph no last name.
Number 8, we got Phantom X, which is probably the coolest name of all of these guys, I'm gonna be honest. Now, he first appeared in 2002 in the new X-Men series number 128, created out of the Weapon Plus program and acted as a Super Sentinel for a while. The Weapon Plus program made a group of people or mutants with techno-organic organisms being fused with nanotechnology of a Sentinel. I don't really know what that means, but Phantom X was born from his mother, who was one of these Weapon Plus made people, when she was fertilized with nano machines. So his powers, they're interesting because he has a nervous system known as the EVA, which can become external, and when the EVA actually leaves him, he becomes more powerful because he doesn't even feel his injuries. Also, the EVA can shapeshift, it identifies as a woman. Phantom X also even has a backup internal nervous system in case EVA gets damaged. Phantom X also has the ability to go into a state of mind and do his own self-repairs. He's an amazing marksman, and his bullets apparently never miss because they are laced with mutant skin. At one point, he was capable of even skewing reality with illusions. Weird.
And at number 7, Sage. Sage is a character who debuted back in 1980, appearing in the X-Men issue 132. And she has a variety of mental abilities that can often be a tad confusing. Think of Sage like a supercomputer. Her brain has unlimited storage capacity. She can recall anything at any time with perfect clarity. And the speed of her thoughts allows her to analyze her surroundings for data within seconds, almost instantaneously. She's like a back computer. In addition to that, she can calculate probability of events based on said data. Sage can multitask too, completing various actions all at once in her brain. And if that wasn't wild enough, she has perfect control over her body because of her superpowered mind, meaning she can recreate any physical actions that she's seen once, as long as they are within the parameters that her body is capable of. She can even see a person's genetic code and read their DNA, and selectively evolve existing genetic traits, which can tap into latent abilities, although she can't reverse the procedure, which has caused unpredictable side effects in the past. She is a walking, talking bat computer. Up next at 6, Lockheed. Lockheed is a literal dragon. Well, actually, he is an alien dragon who was Kitty Pryde's longtime companion and a member of both the X-Men and Excalibur teams. First appearing in the Uncanny X-Men issue 166 from 1983, this little dude does a lot more than just your typical dragon stuff of flying and projecting fire. And he is also the size of a cat, which is kind of super adorable. Lockheed comes from a race of advanced dragon-like extraterrestrials who can travel through space via astral ships that transport their essence, which kinda seems absolutely absurd. Now, because of his empath abilities, he is able to understand human speech despite not being able to speak it all that well, and is immune to telepathic probing. So he's not just a cat-sized dragon after all. Although, I mean, would you rather have a real dragon or a tiny dragon that was cat-sized? Personally, I would go for the cat-sized dragon. Much more manageable and, adorable too. And at 5, Revanche. Revanche, who debuted in 1993 in X-Men issue 17, is one of a few characters on this list whose powers are not only confusing, but so is their origin story. So Revanche's early appearances were plagued by continuity errors in Marvel's comics, thanks to one of her creators, Fabian Nicieza, failing to read Uncanny X-Men issue 255. In that issue, the character Psylocke is discovered on the shores of an island by the Hand, whereas in issue 22 of the second volume of X-Men, a handful of issues after Revanche's debut, her origin story contradicted the one in Uncanny X-Men, with the character having come to possess Psylocke's body. Confusing, right? Revanche was said to have been an intuitive empath prior to switching bodies with Psylocke, but after switching bodies she gained telepathic abilities and could psionically generate a blade, a psi blade that she could use to force her way into other telepathic characters' minds. So essentially she is Psylocke but not Psylocke and used to be an empath and is just a big jumble of continuity errors. Yeah, no bueno. And at number 4, boom tube creation from Cyborg. For starters, boom tubes are already mildly confusing. Let's begin with that. Boom tubes are an extra-dimensional point-to-point Einstein-Rosen bridge that are typically opened by a mother box and used as a means of transportation primarily by residents of Apocalypse and New Genesis. New God stuff. While often opened by a mother box, there's a handful of heroes out there who are capable of opening themselves, one of which is Cyborg. The New 52 version of Cyborg altered the hero's origin slightly by having parademons invade Star Labs after Victor was converted into his cybernetic self. After arguing with his father about what he had been transformed into, he then chased down a parademon and saved a woman on the street from it. But in the process, he absorbed something from a parademon, boom tube technology, which allowed him to transport himself or other individuals. All in all, it is an ability that kind of felt like it was tacked on, but hey, not gonna complain. Moving on to number 3, Dazzler. Dazzler is often one of the most ripped on mutant characters in the comics, thanks to her publication origins. Initially, Dazzler, aka Alison Blair, was commissioned by Casablanca Records in 1978 as an animated special multimedia cross-promotion called The Disco Queen. Casablanca would bail on the project thanks to financial concerns, but the Disco Queen would live on, first appearing in the Uncanny X-Men issue 130 in 1980 as Dazzler. Dazzler's abilities, which are yet another source of her history of mockery, include the power to convert sound into light beams of various forms and intensity. She is also a trained singer, actress, and dancer, and of course is a highly accomplished roller skater. No joke on that last one. Arguably, the sound conversion trick of hers is the most confusing. She takes sonic vibrations which reach her body and transduces them into light. She has a large range of frequencies that she can do this with all kinds of sound pressures regardless of complexity, dissonance, or randomness being changed and converted, meaning a song and the sound of a car skidding could both be converted into light. So, what do these light beams do? This is where it gets even a little bit more baffling. She can temporarily blind people by creating a pulse of light of several thousand watts. She can create a cascade of sparkling lights that messes with people's equilibrium. She can create a strobe effect, which is no good for people who have epilepsy, and she can create rays of light that use patterns to produce trance-like effects in her victims. Dazzler can generate enough ultraviolet light to melt large metal objects. She can even use those light rays to create holograms and has used light energy to generate flight, which I don't quite understand, but that's okay. The more you know. And at number 2, Maggot. Maggot is a character that we've discussed a handful of times on our channel thanks to his absurd abilities. He has a slug-based digestive system. Oh, and he also is psychometric. Now, first appearing in Uncanny X-Men issue 345 from 1997, Maggot is a fellow whose digestive system is quite unique. Where his intestines should be, he has a hollow cavity that's home to a pair of semi-sentient slugs, or maggots, hence the name. He's named those slugs Eenie and Meanie. Eenie and Meanie can burrow themselves out of his torso, and at super fast speeds, they attack a foe or object with a powerful enzyme, which then processes and digests said object, or person. From there, they come back to Maggot, crawl back into his hollow cavity, and then transmit the food energy they collected to him, which then can supercharge him and allow him to do a variety of things like increase his strength, physical size, his sturdiness, stamina, etc. If the slugs don't re-enter his belly, this process does not work. And in the past, he's actually lost one of his slugs too. He doesn't get another one. He's left with one slug, which means I guess half of the abilities of digestive power with one slug. And finally, in at number 1, Darwin. Darwin is a peculiar character. First appearing in 2006, X-Men Deadly Genesis issue 2, he's a mutant who has reactive evolution powers. When he was first born, his mother practically disowned him because of his abilities, and later he was experimented on by scientists until Moira McTaggart recruited him. So what does reactive evolution mean in Darwin's case? Well, his body automatically adapted to his environment or circumstances, which allows him to survive anything, although the extent of that capability has never been fully defined in the comics. Now, in the past, he's gained night vision in the dark, he's grown gills when in water, he became fireproof when his skin was exposed to an open flame. But it's not just basic physical transformations with him. He once converted his entire body into pure energy. He has increased his own intelligence. He morphed into a sponge when he was shot at with a weapon meant to destroy one's nervous system. He has learned different languages by merely looking at them. And when facing off against the Hulk, his body teleported him away from the battle. That last bit is interesting because Darwin doesn't have a choice over how his body reacts. While he may have chosen to increase his strength when fighting against the likes of the Hulk, his body sensed the best means of survival was to teleport him away from the battle. His body is even proven to process alcohol faster when drinking, preventing him from getting drunk. It's a tough life for Darwin.
Number 10. Dial H. Now this isn't one specific superhero, but rather a comic series featuring a rotary device called the dial. Though in the most recent 2019 series, it is a phone, a rotary dial phone, that allows the user to access superpowers when they dial hero, hence Dial H. The title is 100% a play on the Alfred Hitchcock title Dial M for Murder. This series first debuted in the 60s and has had numerous updates since. The first iteration debuted in House of Mystery number 156 back in 1966. In it, Robert Reed fell into a cavern and found the dial. He then used it to transform into various superheroes, and they would change. He wasn't always the same one. And it wasn't until the 80s that would come into play with existing heroes. Although, there was Plastic Man. Plastic Man was a thing back in the day. Also, other people could use the dial. It wasn't key to one person or anything. The 80s series also had the added aspect that fans could submit their own heroes and villains and would get credit and a t-shirt. Over time, the series has evolved into an examination of what it means to be a hero and how finding the dial impacts people's lives. Spoilers, it's not always for good. The dial is pretty random with what hero you become, but that's part of the fun. It's the mystery box superhero power generator. I was gonna say loot box, but you don't have to pay for it. Heyo. Well, I mean not with money, but emotionally, oh yes, you pay.
Up next at number 9, Gwenpool. When Gwenpool first hit the scene in 2015, she was a huge success, becoming instantly beloved amongst fans after merely appearing on the cover of Deadpool's Secret Wars issue 2. Here is the thing though, many people mistaken her abilities as those of Deadpool's, with her being assumed to be a female version of Wade Wilson. Gwenpool's name may have hilarious relations to Deadpool's thanks to a goof up from her dry cleaner, and the fact that her last name is Poole, spelled P-O-O-L-E. That was something that was retconned after her first appearance, might I add. So if she doesn't share Deadpool's powers, what exactly can she do? Well, she is a brilliant tactician, has vast knowledge of the Marvel Universe, claiming that she is from a timeline in which she read the comics and is now actually a part of them, plus she breaks the fourth wall like it is nobody's business. She knows her way around a whole lot of weapons, is capable of interdimensional travel, and has a regenerative healing factor, which yes, Deadpool has too, but they're very, very different characters, people. Very different.
Number 8, you got Hercules. You know, kind of an old sort of guy, you know what I mean? Debuting in Avengers number 10, 1964. Now, he was originally simply a minion of Immortus, and he belongs to the Olympian species. Like most, just like Hercules himself, he's got super strength, speed, and stamina. Known to be the strongest of all the Olympians, he could actually apparently pick up a sequoia tree, smash it to bits. It's also originally believed that he even moved the island of Manhattan. However, that was a little too much for comic book writers, and they were pretty much like, nah, he was just bluffing, he was just saying, tune the talk, you know what I mean? It wasn't true at all. Ooh. On top of that, he can go 100 miles per hour and go toe to toe with Thor and can withstand, you know, the impacts from bullets. He's kind of another Superman if you really think about it, but his mace itself is kind of like the mace version of Thor's hammer. Thing is, he's backed up by Olympian magic, so nothing like even diseases can hurt him. However, if Zeus takes away his powers, he's pretty much useless. It'd be interesting to see what would happen if Rogue touched him.
In at 7, The Impossible Man. The Impossible Man hails from Marvel Comics, first appearing in Fantastic Four issue 11 from 1963. He is an alien character from the planet Pop-Up, which yes is a great name, and he has shape-shifting abilities. Plus he was typically used for comedic relief, portrayed as a lonely, attention-seeking extraterrestrial who annoyed the crap out of the Fantastic Four. In addition to his shape-shifting and mimicry abilities, he could also teleport and had an encyclopedic knowledge of Earth culture. So if that description is so straightforward, how did he end up getting on this list? Well, it's because of how the Impossible Man was depicted. His first appearance had him visiting Earth on vacation and assuming that he was the most powerful being on Earth after meeting the Fantastic Four. And then the story consisted of him harassing the team of heroes, wanting to start up an Earth pop-up travel agency. His earlier depictions gave him unlimited shape-shifting powers via molecular rearrangement, but due to his use as a comedic character, the extent of his abilities often fell into befuddling territory, and the full scale of his powers became questionable, since he was also able to mimic the likes of Thor and Wolverine. All in all, looks really funny, doesn't seem like much of a threat, kind of questionable as to what exactly his shape-shifting abilities can do. We know he can, but overall, very baffling.
Number 6, Zatanna. Now you may be thinking, are you both okay? Everyone understands Zatanna, a magician, she speaks backwards, but what some people miss out on is the scale of her powers. Zatanna is actually one of the most powerful sorceresses on Earth, and her powers appear to be inherited. What people tend to misuse or not remember is that her magic increases if not used. So if she doesn't use her magic, it builds to a critical point, which can cause an incident. This is why she releases it in such a controlled manner. However, if she uses too much, she depletes her powers, so she has to find a balance. She can also do spells spells spoken for it and has done so on rare occasions, and she can also do blood magic. Also, the limits of her powers are not fully defined. So have we seen the ceiling? We don't know. She's dangerous. Don't be fooled just because you could temporarily stop her with some duct tape.
Moving on to number 5, Ink. Our next baffling character is a Marvel creation who first appeared in Young X-Men issue 1 from 2008, and his powers are his tattoos. Yes, no joke, this fellow, whose real name is Eric Gitter, gets all of his abilities from his tattoos, his body ink, and has no actual superpowers of his own. Ink has access to a mutant tattoo artist who gave superpowers to individuals via his iconic power symbols that he would tattoo onto their skin. Now, Ink's tattoos consist of a biohazard symbol to make his foes extremely sick, a symbol that allows him to heal others, one that gives him super strength, wings on his back that grant him flight, a nuclear symbol in case he, wants to create a deadly nuclear explosion, a red cross on his neck that gives him self-healing powers, lightning bolts on his temples that lets him read minds, and 2 explosive symbols that allow him to blow up objects and punch through walls. But here's the real kicker, my friends. That tattoo artist, the mutant one, the one with the real abilities, he went into a catatonic state after giving Ink his last tattoo, which was the symbol for the Phoenix Force around his eye. All in all, Ink just kinda sucks. Can't really do anything, and he's just riffing off of this poor mutant tattoo artist, who he then put into a coma. So, yeah. Screw you, Ink. Up next, number 4, Zorn. Zorn is a confusing character to begin with. Is he his own dude? Is he Magneto? Does that mean Magneto can do a bunch of other stuff like manipulate gravity and turn his sun head into a black hole? Lots of questions, friends. So, for starters, Zorn is a dude who first showed up in New X-Men Annual 2001 as a Chinese mutant who had a star for a brain. That's why he wears his little helmet. He ended up becoming the subject of an incredibly confusing retcon, in which he was revealed to be Magneto, who had actually died in the Planet X storyline prior. It made little sense. Then it was revealed in Excalibur Volume 3 Issue 1 that Magneto never died at all, which meant Zorn wasn't actually Magneto, and that led to a whole confusing storyline that featured Zorn's brother, who was kinda like his twin, and overall it was just a big mess. Now that could largely be the reason why so many fans find Zorn and his abilities perplexing. But even when Zorn was revealed not to be Magneto after all, his brother shared very similar powers to him, and was technically the second Zorn, and there were a bunch of major differences. Rather than having a sun in his head that his helmet covered, his brother had a black hole there. I mean, similar but very, very different things. The original Zorn also had healing powers, electricity and magnetism generation and manipulation, the ability to teleport via time-space wormholes, gravity manipulation, telepathy, and was self-sustaining. So yeah, that's a whole lot of powers to cram into one dude who may or may not be Magneto, but probably wasn't. Baffling. Moving on to number 3, the Negative Man. The Negative Man is a character that first debuted in 1963, a DC creation who has eluded fans for years. I mean, it kinda makes sense as to why he's a member of the Doom Patrol. Negative Man, aka Larry Traynor, is an individual who was accidentally exposed to a radioactive field in the atmosphere while piloting a test plane. This gave him an interesting set of powers. Not only was he now radioactive, but he had the ability to release negatively charged energy from his body, referred to as the negative spirit or his soul self. Now this soul self is intangible, capable of flight, it can generate minor explosions when it comes into contact with positive energy, and it also acts as a means of temporal astral projection. It's visually represented as a shadowy silhouette of a human being. The downside? Well, Larry's body is physically defenseless when he is separated from it, so he only uses this ability 60 seconds at a time in order to avoid risking death. Now because of his radioactive nature, he wears special bandages that protect those around him, making him look a whole hell of a lot like the Invisible Man, something that can be slightly confusing to those unfamiliar with his character or the Doom Patrol upon first glance. And that, my friends, is exactly why he ends up on this list.
Number 2, Pure Heart. This is Archie Andrews, from that time when Archie was a superhero. Archie comics do what they want, and in 2019 they brought this series back again. So when Archie is Pure Heart, his powers depend on his pH factor, or his pure heart factor, so he can only access his powers if he has a pure heart, hence his name, Pure Heart the Powerful. Here's the thing, he can lose his powers really easily, just one impure thought. So feeling jealous? Boom, powerless. Accept a gift or kiss from a grateful rescuee? Boom, no powers. I hope they don't do it mid-flight, cause then, well, they're both dead.
And finally, in our number 1 spot, Phantom X. First appearing in New X-Men issue 128 from 2000, Phantom X was a character created by the Weapon Plus program to act as a super sentinel against mutants. He's a very, very convoluted, complex character. So, Mutant Plus does this. They use a process that uses techno-organic organisms whose living tissue is then fused with Sentinel nanotech on a cellular level. Phantom X is birthed from a woman who underwent that process. His mama went through that. and he was raised in a place called the World, a man-made environment for these super sentinels. All in all, it is very absurd and peculiar, as are his powers. His nervous system is referred to as something called Eva. This nervous system can come out of his body, yes, like outside of his physical being, and it develops into a techno-organic flying saucer of sorts that he then has a symbiotic relationship with. When Eva is separated from him and in pain, he feels pain. But when he is attacked or someone or something has inflicted damage onto him, he feels nothing, no pain at all, and can ignore those injuries. Phantom X can also see through Eva's point of view, and can control her movement and reshape her form, or body if you will, if he concentrates enough. If that wasn't perplexing enough, Phantom X has microtechnology laced into his blood, which have some eerie effects, prohibiting him from things like believing in anything greater than himself, like gods or supernatural beings or the concept of love. He also can't see colors, which, I mean, in comparison to all the other stuff, is probably not that big of a deal. Dogs can't see colors, so. He can self-heal, and he can alter his body to increase his strength or hearing range. He can also enter a trance in order to perform crucial tasks, such as perform surgery on his own body. All in all, he is a curious character to say the least, and to not entirely understand what he does, I mean, in my opinion, is perfectly acceptable.